Chapter 958. The purpose of my trip to Rapid City was to stop the monster race from using the divine instrument to awaken the ancient beasts. That was why I immediately asked about it after I'd reunited with the snake spirit. The snake spirit nodded at my question. Of course I know about it. I've come to Rapid City mainly for this matter. Moreover, I'm the host of the awakening ceremony. The snake spirit's words weren't out of my expectations. When I'd heard from Dean Shibo that the ceremony required someone with the dragon race's bloodline, I'd guessed that the ceremony was related to the dragon race. The host was most likely from the dragon race, but I hadn't expected to coincidentally meet the snake spirit. Without waiting for me to continue asking, the snake spirit suddenly took out a square seal and placed it on the table in front of me. This is the divine instrument that they're using to awaken the beasts, the Kong Tong seal. I was momentarily stunned. The Kong Tong seal was the divine instrument that President Lee possessed. How did it end up in the monster territory? Could it be that something happened to Old Lee after I left? This situation was out of my expectations. I instinctively asked, "Why is the Kong Tong seal in your hands? Who gave it to you?" The snake spirit disagreed. "I'm going to host the awakening ceremony. This divine instrument is the core of the ceremony. Of course, it has to be given to me. You should have heard of the monster emperor from the wolf race. He was the one who gave it to me." It seemed that the snake spirit's identity as a dragon race member was really useful. The monster race didn't suspect him at all and directly handed such a huge matter to him. Since they had the artifact in their hands and the snake spirit was the host of the awakening, it was easy to destroy the ritual. As long as they ran away with the snake spirit, they would lose the host and the artifact at the same time. Unless the demon race went out to snatch another artifact and waited for the dragon race to send more people, the ritual would not be able to continue. I seemed to have found a solution to the problem that had been weighing on my mind. However, after pondering for a while, I confirmed that the matter couldn't be resolved in this way. Firstly, if I ran away with the snake spirit, the monster race could snatch the divine instrument and the dragon race could send more people to conduct the ceremony again. The final outcome would be treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Secondly, Tong Tong is still with the dragon clan. If the snake spirit and I run away, Tong Tong might not survive. In addition, the monster race wants to awaken the 4 great ferocious beasts, and this is only one of them. If possible, I want to stop all of them. The serpent spirit's identity as a dragon is obviously very important, so it is very important to protect his identity. It is not wise to expose him just because of this ferocious beast. I tapped my fingers on the table and pondered in silence for a while. Then I said to the snake spirit, "I'm here to stop this ceremony. Since you're the host, let's discuss how we can disrupt the ceremony without exposing our identities." Just as I thought, the spirit snake didn't care about this matter at all. It just waved its hand and said, "Do as you see fit. If there's anything you need help with, just tell me. We can run away now, but you have to promise me one thing. I want to take Xiao Wei with me. This fellow is really affectionate." However, the death of the little white snake, Hui Hui, had a great impact on the spirit snake. It wouldn't be a bad thing if he could develop a relationship with the cat girl. I smiled and shook my head. "I won't run away. You don't have to worry about that. Your identity as a dragon will still be useful in the future. This time, we'll work together and try our best to destroy this ritual without anyone knowing." The spirit snake frowned and shook its head after hearing what I said. "That's not possible. Let's not talk about the others, but the monster emperor of the wolf race is just outside Rapid City. Although he most likely won't participate in this ceremony, once the ceremony fails, I'm afraid our little tricks won't escape his eyes." What the spirit snake said was what I was worried about the most. Currently, my cultivation had already recovered to the level of a breakthrough, while the spirit snake already had the cultivation of a breakthrough after going through the dragon race's training. However, even if the two of us combined our powers, we still couldn't compare to the monster emperor of the wolf race. It would definitely be difficult to do something under his nose. I continued to tap on the table as I pondered. The monster emperor of the wolf race had a cultivation that was 1 realm higher than ours. The suppression of such realms was the most terrifying. It was impossible for him not to pay attention to such a major event like awakening the ferocious beasts. As long as he was watching, everything that we did would be exposed, unless we could use a power that was even higher than his realm. My eyes suddenly lit up as I thought about the god's power. The god's power was the power of the Monster Emperor. Although I couldn't confirm the level of the Monster Emperor's power, I believed that it would definitely be much higher than the Monster Emperor of the wolf race. I had subconsciously kept the god's power after using the ancient era's beast pill to draw out the god's power in my body. I didn't expect that it would be so useful so quickly. When the awakening ceremony started, I would disguise myself as a person with the dragon race's bloodline and use the god's power to cause chaos. With the help of the spirit snake, we would completely mess up the ceremony. That way, even if the Monster Emperor of the wolf race personally came to investigate, he would only be shocked when he discovered that the god's power was beyond his realm. It would be almost impossible for him to trace the source. To be on the safe side, I took out half of the god's power in my body and turned it into a golden ball of light. I passed it to the spirit snake and explained my plan in detail. The spirit snake wasn't very interested in my plan, but was very curious about the golden ball of light formed by the god's power. After staring at it for half a day, he even licked his lips and told me that he had an intense desire to swallow the light ball. Strictly speaking, the dragon race was also part of the monster race. The Monster Emperor's power was definitely a great supplement to any monster race. It wasn't strange for the spirit snake to have such a reaction. However, he still couldn't consume the light ball at the moment. After completing this task, it wouldn't be a problem for me to give him some god's power. After receiving my promise, the spirit snake was rather happy. He nodded and promised that he would definitely complete the task. After confirming this matter, I ran through the plan in my mind again. The monster race used a mystical power to awaken the ferocious beasts. No matter what the process was, as long as it wasn't completed in an instant, there would definitely be an opportunity to take action. Furthermore, with the god's power, there wouldn't be any problems. After confirming this, I heaved a sigh of relief. I finally had some confidence in my heart. When I had decided to do this, I had the mentality that if I didn't succeed, I would die trying. However, I didn't expect that the development of the situation would be exceptionally smooth, far surpassing my expectations. The spirit snake and I plotted for more than 2 hours. After confirming this matter, I stood up and bade farewell. Before I left, I told him to properly sense his god's power for the next few days and to minimize contact with other people to prevent any accidents from happening. If there were any new information regarding this ritual, I would be at the relay station nearby. He had to inform me at the first instance. After instructing him, I returned to the previous hall. Vivian was still waiting there with an anxious expression. After seeing that I had returned, she heaved a sigh of relief. After seeing that the spirit snake didn't follow me, she hastily walked to my side and asked, "OG, are you all right? Why'd you take so long? Did the dragon race make things difficult for you? Did your bloodline test pass?" She asked 4 questions in one go. It was obvious that Vivian was very concerned about me. This was completely different from her attitude towards the spirit snake. I smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, the test has already passed." Even though the dragon race's attitude was a little arrogant, he didn't make things difficult for me. Instead, the two of us chatted happily. The reason why I stayed for such a long time was because we were on the same wavelength and regretted not meeting earlier. I casually said some nonsense and also helped to clear the spirit snake's name. I hoped that Vivian would have a good impression of me. After hearing what I said, the cat girl felt much more at ease. She extended her hand to hold my hand and said softly, "Since there's nothing else, let's quickly leave. When the dragon race comes, he'll talk a lot of nonsense again." As she said that, she pulled me out of the room. Even though the monster race didn't have a strict code of separation between men and women, their nature was similar to that of the human race. With my relationship with Vivian, it wasn't too appropriate for us to hold hands. I wanted to break free, but I felt that it wasn't appropriate. As I looked at the cat girl, Vivian, who wasn't cold anymore, I had a strange thought. Chapter 959. The next time I saw the snake spirit, It was already 2 days later. I stared at the two small horns on his head as though I was looking at a green grassland. The snake spirit obviously didn't know why I was staring at his head. He scratched his head and asked me what I was looking at. I'm looking at the grassland. Let's not talk about this first. Is there any news from the city lord's mansion? The snake spirit scratched his head again, but didn't find any grass on his head. Thus, he didn't ask further and nodded. I'm here to inform you about this. The city lord of Rapid City has informed me that the beast summoning ceremony will be held in 3 days. Last night, he told me in detail about what to do during the ceremony. According to him, the reason why the dragon race is needed to host the ceremony is mainly because the dragon race's bloodline has the strongest ancient aura. We need to use the dragon race's bloodline to awaken the beast's soul. Then, with the help of the divine instrument, we can revive the beast completely. After waiting bitterly for 2 days, I finally got the news. I was instantly energized. After listening to the snake spirit, I quickly asked, will the wolf race's monster emperor participate in the ceremony? The snake spirit shook his head. I specifically asked. The city lord said that I will host the ceremony. Monster Emperor crew won't participate, but he will pay close attention to this matter. This was another piece of good news. The ceremony would be hosted by the snake spirit, so it would be easy to play some tricks. Moreover, the wolf race's monster emperor June's power wasn't something that the wolf race's monster emperor could see through. Overall, the success rate of the plan was extremely high. Of course, I couldn't guarantee that it would be a complete success. After all, I didn't know much about the monster emperor June's power. I could only say that I had already put all my chips on the table. I would do my best and leave the rest to fate. After the snake spirit finished talking about the important matters, his shifty eyes started to roll around. He chuckled and asked me, Brother Zhou, why isn't Xiao Wei here? I pointed to the room next door and said angrily, this is my bedroom. Of course, she's staying next door. Could it be that she's staying with me? That's true. The snake spirit chuckled again. If there's nothing else, I'll go look for Xiao Wei. After I nodded, the snake spirit left. I could vaguely see him taking out a bunch of fresh flowers. I didn't know where he had hidden them. Now that the plan was almost complete, I felt much more relaxed. I stayed in my room and adjusted my breathing, quietly waiting for the beast summoning ritual to begin. 2 days later, Vivian, Roger, and I received a notice from the city lord's mansion, asking us to gather at the plaza outside the city lord's mansion the next day. We already knew the purpose of this trip before we set off, so after receiving this notice, Vivian and Logue didn't pay much attention to it and went to bed early, waiting to wake up early the next day. Early the next morning, Yang Ling had just woken up when he heard the hubbub of voices outside. When he went out to take a look, the entrance of the relay station was filled with various groups of beastmen. They were all heading towards the plaza not far away. I hadn't gone out for the past few days, nor had I paid attention to the other people in the relay station. Only now did I realize that there were several hundred beastmen with dragon bloodline that had been gathered. From this number, it seemed that Rock City had only sent 3 people, which was a very small number. Vivian and Logue had also woken up at this moment, so the 3 of us followed the crowd and arrived at the plaza. At this moment, there were already guards from the city lord's mansion sorting out the crowd and arranging their positions. After everyone was arranged into several square formations, a few people walked out from under the enormous golden wolf statue at the center of the plaza. The one leading them was the snake spirit. An old man wearing a golden robe embroidered with a wolf's head followed closely behind him. He must be the city lord of Rapid City. After they stood under the statue of the golden wolf, a few sturdy bear tribe guards carried a huge bronze cauldron with difficulty and slowly walked in front of them. When the bronze cauldron was put down, the heavy bronze cauldron's 4 feet instantly cracked and shattered the tiles beneath it. After the cauldron was put down, the guards brought over a sacrificial table and placed it in front of the cauldron. Next, various sacrificial offerings were placed on the table, filling it to the brim. Once everything was in place, the city lord of Rapid City called out, and the people around him knelt down. Then, 2 strong men carried over a life-size statue and placed it next to the sacrificial table. When I saw the statue, I was shocked. This was the statue of the monster Emperor Mu that I had seen in the Green Hill tribe. Back in Immortal World, I had heard from Nangong's sacrificial evil spirit that the demon folk of the mountain and sea realm were the subordinates of the monster Emperor Mu. But after coming to the mountain and sea realm, this was my first time seeing the statue of the monster Emperor Mu. Previously, I had thought that after so many years of development, the demon folk had given birth to the half-beastmen, and that they had ended their worship of the monster Emperor Mu. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. Of course, even if the mountain and sea realm continued to worship the monster Emperor Mu, I couldn't reveal my identity. On the one hand, I couldn't prove it. On the other hand, when an ancestor was made into an idol, everyone was happy to kneel. If the idol came back to life, that would be a completely different matter. As the city lord and the other guards knelt, the surrounding guards also put their hands to their chests and knelt down. Their heavy armor creaked in unison. The Draconians and half-beastmen standing in the square were hesitating about whether or not to kneel when the spirit serpent stepped forward. With a wave of his hand, the sacrificial offerings on the sacrificial table were all thrown into the huge copper cauldron. Then, he opened his mouth, and a stream of white dragon flame entered the huge cauldron. The sacrificial offerings were instantly set ablaze. After the cauldron was ignited, the spirit serpent didn't retract the dragon flame. Instead, it continued to spit it out, causing the flames to grow taller and taller. When they reached a height of several dozen meters, the image of a crimson flame dragon appeared. After the flame dragon appeared, a dignified voice could be heard in the square. Draconians, close your eyes and focus. Activate your monster power and inject it into the flames. It was obviously the spirit serpent's voice. However, as I was used to hearing his lazy voice, it was hard for me to recognize him when he suddenly spoke in a low and solemn voice. After receiving the order, the half-beastmen with the dragon bloodline immediately followed the order and activated their monster power, which contained a trace of dragon power, and sent it into the cauldron. Although the cultivation of the Draconians weren't high, with a few hundred of them together, they weren't any weaker than the spirit serpent. Among the spirit serpent's dragon flame, the flames in the cauldron were only 10 meters tall, while the flame dragon swimming above, it was only 10 meters long. After everyone sent in their monster power, the flames instantly grew to 10 meters. The figure of the flame dragon became clearer, and its body grew to about 6 meters. I was in the crowd, so I couldn't see if the spirit serpent had activated his god's power. However, seeing that the flame dragon was about to be formed, I decided to activate it first. I mixed the god's power in my body with the monster power and sent it into the cauldron without anyone noticing. After the golden god's power entered the giant cauldron along with the crimson demonic energy, the flames inside the cauldron suddenly erupted, reaching a height of 30 meters. The crimson dragon at the top of the cauldron almost instantly turned golden. 2 long golden dragon whiskers grew out of the dragon's head, and the scales on its body solidified bit by bit. After a short moment, the red dragon let out a sonorous roar. Following the dragon's roar, the crimson dragon broke free from the flames and swooped down, crashing into the open space in front of the cauldron. With a loud bang, everyone standing in the square was sent flying dozens of meters away. The huge sacrificial table and the cauldron were also sent flying. Without the supply of monster power, the flames that were dozens of meters tall were extinguished when the cauldron was sent flying. Chapter 960. I frowned as I saw that the snake spirit had reached the most crucial step of the ritual. I felt that something was wrong. When I'd mixed the god's power with the monster power and sent it to the cauldron, I'd planned to send the god's power into the shadow of the scarlet dragon. When a shadow came into contact with the slumbering monster, I'd detonate the god's power and destroy the ritual. If possible, it would be best to destroy a part of the power of the Kongtong seal. That way, I would be able to solve the problem once and for all. I'd successfully sent the god's power in, but before I could activate it, the scarlet dragon shadow had crashed into the ground. My connection with the god's power had unexpectedly disappeared. My mind was in a mess. I tried to use my spiritual sense to search for it, but to no avail. At that moment, I lifted my head to look at the snake's spirit. He had a grave expression as he transmitted his voice to me. I attached the golden ball to the Kongtong seal and sent it over, but I can't sense it now. What should I do? I remained silent and didn't reply. Both of us had lost control of our God's power at the same time. From this, it could be seen that there was definitely something in this abyss that was blocking our senses. In fact, I was even beginning to suspect that the vicious beast had awakened and was forcefully seizing the God's power for itself. If that was really the case, then my plan had indirectly helped the monster race. Not only had I failed to steal a chicken, but I'd also come home shorn. While I was bewildered, a rumbling sound came from the black hole. Immediately after, a silver light suddenly shot out and dyed the entire sky silver. In the silver light, a sparkling and translucent seal-like object gradually appeared in midair. It was the Kongtong seal that the snake spirit had previously thrown in. Following the appearance of the seal, a series of bestial cries that sounded like barking dogs resounded from the abyss. The ground started to constantly tremble. Even the empty space that had been dyed silver started to sway and collapse. Not long after, a black shadow appeared from the abyss. It was like a black lightning bolt that suddenly shot into the sky. The entire space was like a mirror that had been shattered by the impact. The black shadow scuttled to the side of the Kongtong seal, opened its mouth, and swallowed it in one gulp. The silver space was completely annihilated, and the phantom image of the Kongtong seal also completely disappeared. Only the black shadow was left in the air. It floated down from the sky, and when it landed on the ground, it suddenly opened its mouth and swallowed a few demi-humans with dragon bloodlines that were closest to it. At that moment, I could clearly see the appearance of the black shadow. It had the body of a tiger, and a pair of huge wings grew on its back. Its entire body was purplish red, and the hair on its back was like steel needles. It looked fierce and ferocious. The four ancient beasts had their names. From its appearance, I could tell that it was Qiong-Chi. Seeing that Qiong-Chi had started to devour people, the entire plaza was in chaos. The half-blood beastmen that were participating in the ceremony scattered in all directions. However, before they could even take a few steps, there was suddenly a vast power that descended from the sky and fixed everyone's body in place. Even I couldn't move at all. I recognized it immediately. This power was definitely the power of immortal Xiaju. In other words, the Wolf Clan's monster emperor that had been hiding in the dark had finally made a move. What did he mean by that? Qiong-Chi loved to devour humans. Could it be that the demonic emperor of the Wolf Clan was going to give these half-beastmen with the bloodline of the Dragon Clan to Qiong-Chi as food? If that was the case, this demon emperor Crui's methods were a little too cruel. It had to be known that these half-blood beastmen all had the dragon bloodline, and the Dragon Clan valued the bloodline the most. Although they couldn't treat these half-blood beastmen as members of the same clan, from their attitude of checking and registering every half-blood beastman with the Dragon Clan bloodline, it was clear that they valued these people very much. Moreover, Demon Monarch Cru's actions didn't seem to give the Dragon Tribe any face at all. After making use of them, he immediately sacrificed them. It was extremely vicious. Below the golden wolf statue, the snake spirit also widened his eyes when he saw this scene. He seemed to want to stop it, but just as he raised his arm, he also froze in mid-air. Obviously, the power of the demon, the Arch of the Wolf Clan, had also been exerted on him. I couldn't be bothered to pity these pitiful half-blood beastmen who were going to be sacrificed, but I was worried about my own safety first. This Qiong-Chi beast had the power of the Dawn Realm, which was different from the Howling Beast. If I were to be swallowed into his stomach, I definitely wouldn't be able to survive. However, under the suppression of the demon, the Arch of the Wolf Clan, I wouldn't be able to break free by relying on my own strength. If I were to use the Xinyuan sword's power, I should be able to break free, but my identity would be exposed. In that case, although I could avoid Qiong-Chi's threat, the demon, the Arch of the Wolf Clan, definitely wouldn't let me off. It was obvious that the situation before me was a dead end. I glanced at the snake spirit, and he was also staring at me. His eyes were filled with anger and worry, as he obviously understood the situation before him. At that moment, Qiongqi flapped his wings and flew a few steps across the plaza. His elephant-like body was like a bottomless pit, and he directly swallowed all the half-blood beastmen in the vicinity into his stomach. After swallowing more than 10 people, Qiongqi was silent for a while, as though he was savoring the taste of the food. After a short moment, he smacked his lips, flapped his wings, and flew towards us. His body couldn't move, and he couldn't make a sound in the air. Facing the man-eating demon that was flying over, even the usually cold and arrogant Luo Gu had tears streaming down his face. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. As for the cat girl, Wei Wei on, she had already closed her eyes, waiting for the final moment to arrive. I took a deep breath and started to circulate my power towards the Xin Yuan sword in my body. Even though there was no way out, rather than waiting for death, I might as well give it my all. At the very least, I would be able to drag a few down with me before I died. In the blink of an eye, Qiongqi had already landed on the ground in front of us. Moreover, he was staring at me as he walked over step by step. Very quickly, Qiongqi was less than 5 meters away from me. I couldn't wait any longer, and just as I was about to draw out the Xin Yuan sword, a hoarse voice suddenly rang in my head. "Respected master, is that you?" I was stunned and stopped my movement to take out the Xin Yuan sword. I looked around and confirmed that the sound was made by the Qiongqi beast standing in front of me. Why did it call me master? The monster race in the mountain and sea realm were all descendants of the ancient monster Emperor Feng's tribe. Since these 4 vicious beasts were sleeping in the mountain and sea realm, it was highly likely that they were monster Emperor Feng's subordinates and had followed him to the mountain and sea realm. In other words, Qiongqi had mistaken me for monster Emperor Feng, which was why it called me master. Only now did I understand that the god's power from before hadn't been wasted. Even though Qiongqi had absorbed it and even stimulated its awakening, it had also allowed Qiongqi to confirm my identity. I quickly organized everything in my head and looked at Qiongqi as I sent a voice transmission. That's right, it's me. I didn't know how Qiongqi had determined my identity, but it didn't question me. Instead, its voice was filled with excitement as it continued to send a voice transmission. "Master, did you awaken me to fight again?" This time, I didn't say anything and just nodded. Qiongqi's voice became even more excited. "After sleeping for thousands of years, it's finally time to fight again. Great master, Qiongqi vows to follow in your footsteps." After saying that, it raised its head and let out a series of roars. Even though I'd already guessed its attitude, I was still stunned when it personally confirmed it. I hadn't expected that after the monster race had awakened Qiongqi, they would finally recognize me as their master. With Qiongqi as the main force, even the wolf monster emperor wouldn't be able to do anything to me. But after thinking about it, I decided to hide it. The monster race was working hard to awaken the 4 vicious beasts, so there was no need for me to reveal myself at this time. When they had awakened all the vicious beasts and even brought them to the battlefield in the human world, I could give the order for the 4 vicious beasts to turn against me. At that time, it would be a huge blow to the monster race. With that in mind, I sent a voice transmission to Qiongqi, telling him to go to the side and rest. Without my orders, he wasn't allowed to get close to me. Chapter 9:61. Since Qiongqi wasn't going to devour anyone, the wolf race's monster emperor naturally didn't need to continue controlling the crowd in the plaza. The moment he released his power, the half-blood beastmen in the plaza instantly scattered, leaving only a few that were scared silly. Roger and Vivian also escaped at the first instance. I hesitated for a moment before I blended into the crowd that was escaping. Even though Qiongqi had communicated with me through telepathy, it was hard to say if the wolf race's monster emperor would suspect me. I had to be careful in the following period of time. He mixed in with the crowd and escaped to the side of the plaza, but was blocked by the guards of the city lord's mansion. A group of tall bearmen soldiers surrounded the area, not allowing anyone to leave. Even though many of the frightened beastmen were crying themselves hoarse, the bearmen guards didn't move in the slightest. At that moment, the roar of the spirit snake resounded from afar. He pointed at the crowd and angrily said something to the city lord of Rapid City. However, the city lord's expression was indifferent, as though he already knew about it and didn't take the spirit snake's anger to heart. Even though the dragon race held a high position in the monster domain, the monster race obviously wouldn't care about the dragon race's attitude when facing the four vicious beasts that decided the fate of the entire monster race. After the serpent spirit roared for a while, the city lord of the wolf clan said something to him with a cold expression. Then, he ignored him and turned around. He raised his voice and said to the crowd on the plaza, "Everyone, Xiong-Chi is one of the four sacred beasts of my demon clan. Sacrificing one's body to a sacred beast is an incomparably glorious thing. Today's sacrifice will be rewarded in the future battles. The names of our comrades that have sacrificed themselves will be continuously praised and commemorated in the monster domain." After saying those words of consolation and brainwashing, he waved his hand to signal for the bearmen soldiers to bring the remaining people back to the relay station. Countless bearmen soldiers surged forward like a tide, grabbing us like chickens and sending us back to our respective rooms in the relay station. Before I left, I turned to look at Xiong-Chi, who was still at his original position, quietly licking his fur. I didn't know how the monster race would communicate with him. After I was sent back to my room in the relay station, Vivian and Roger came to my room shortly after. They were obviously frightened. Subconsciously, they gathered around me, trying to find a sense of security. Log, on the other hand, behaved a little better. He maintained his calm on the surface and only paced back and forth in my room. Vivian, on the other hand, seemed to have completely opened her heart in front of me. She was no longer as cold as before. After entering the room, she grabbed my arm and asked me in fright, "Duo-G, why did they lock us up in here? Are you going to feed us to that holy beast? Or do the other sacred beasts also need us to participate in the ceremony?" Looking at her frightened expression, I couldn't bear to push her away, so I patted her shoulder and said gently, "Don't worry. Although Xiong-Chi beasts like to eat humans, I've never heard that they must eat the bloodline of the dragon clan. In fact, it's impossible. If it only eats people with the bloodline of the dragon clan, it will starve to death sooner or later. That was why the city lord of Rapid City wouldn't do such a thing. He probably locked us up in the relay station to calm us down so that we wouldn't be frightened and cause any more trouble. As for the other sacred beasts, Dean Shibo had said that the four sacred beasts were awakened in the four provinces. He definitely wouldn't let us participate in the ceremony. These are all very obvious things. It was impossible for Vivian to not understand. It was just that she had lost her composure after the fright. That was why she was worried about it. After my explanation, Vivian's expression returned to normal. Log, who was beside her, stopped pacing back and forth. He sighed and started to complain. What does this mean? First, they used our bloodline to awaken the sacred beast. Then, they disregarded our lives and allowed the sacred beast to eat us as it pleased. If the sacred beast could only eat humans like us, I would have accepted my fate. However, since that's not the case, why did the city lord of Rapid City do such a thing? Are our lives so worthless? Log said angrily. Vivian sighed and turned to persuade him. It's not that we're worthless. When the sacred beast had just awakened, the city lord and the rest could only allow the sacred beast to roam freely in order to ensure that there wouldn't be any problems. Furthermore, we weren't eaten, right? Let's not complain about this now. We can only hope that this matter will pass quickly. Once we return to Rock City, everything will be fine. Vivian's attitude surprised me. Based on her previous arrogant and cold personality, I thought that she would be as indignant as Log. I didn't expect her to say such words. It seemed that her cold and aloof appearance was just a facade. In essence, she was still a weak little girl. In the face of such unfair treatment, especially when it involved life and death, she would still choose to retreat and resign herself to adversity. I wouldn't doubt her attitude. In fact, when facing a power that far surpassed one's own, excessive hatred and unnecessary courage would be quite dangerous. Retreating would be a more mature attitude, as well as a better way to protect oneself. After the two of them chatted for a while, they became silent. Seeing that it was getting late, I consoled them and sent them back to their rooms. After I calmed down, I started to think about what I was going to do next. The snake spirit had already talked about the news that the monster race had awakened the ferocious beasts. The first place to awaken the ferocious beasts was the North Province, followed by the West Province, South Province, and King City. When I heard from Dean Shibo that the 4 ferocious beasts were in hibernation in the 4 provinces, I subconsciously thought that they were in the East, West, South, and North provinces. After the snake spirit had asked around, I found out that the mysterious East Province wasn't one of the 4 provinces. The last ferocious beast was in hibernation in King City. According to our plan, the snake spirit and I would leave as soon as possible to head to the West Province after this matter was settled. This time, the snake spirit had the convenience of hosting the ceremony, and I also had the qualifications to participate in the ceremony. Comparatively speaking, the difficulty should be the lowest. We still had to think of a way to sneak into the ceremony. The earlier we got there, the earlier we could make plans. However, looking at the current situation, I couldn't act rashly for the time being. At the moment, I couldn't confirm if the wolf monster emperor had noticed the communication between Xiongqi and me. If he had any suspicions, he would definitely keep an eye on me. If I were to give myself away, what awaited me would be the monster emperor's fury. Thus, I purposely stayed in Vivian's room the next day. When the snake spirit came to look for me, it naturally came to Vivian's room as well. While they were talking, I secretly reminded the snake spirit to stay in the city lord's mansion for the next few days. After we set off on our return journey, we would meet up with him halfway. Even though he was suspicious of my abnormally cautious attitude, the snake spirit had a strong point, which was that he never asked too many questions. Seeing that I had a plan, he readily nodded in agreement. For the next few days, the relay station was still closed, and we weren't allowed to leave. Due to the boredom, Vivian stayed in my room almost every day. Her attitude towards me became increasingly intimate. It wasn't just me. Even Roger had noticed this. In the beginning, he came with Vivian, but later on, he found an excuse to stay in his room to give Vivian and me sufficient privacy. This situation made me feel uneasy. I simultaneously felt guilty towards the snake's spirit and Vivian. I wanted to distance myself from them, but being trapped in the relay station, I had nowhere to go and was unable to avoid them. 5 days had passed. Just as I was feeling a loss, Vivian came to my room again in the morning and suddenly said goodbye to me. She told me that her family had come and wanted to bring her back to King City. This news was extremely sudden. Vivian had never mentioned her family before, nor had she mentioned that her family was in King City. For a moment, I was so astonished that I couldn't speak. There wasn't any sadness on Vivian's face. She even squinted her eyes and smiled. After she said that, she suddenly extended her hand and placed it on my cheek. Duo G, thank you for taking care of me during this period of time. I will remember you. Promise me that you will remember me too, all right? The meaning behind her words was that we wouldn't have the chance to meet in the future. I was certain that I didn't have feelings for her, but after hearing her words, I still frowned and felt a sense of loss. Vivian continued to smile, but the corners of her mouth were trembling. She probably didn't want me to see her tears, as she quickly retracted her hand and turned to leave. However, just as she took a step, she stopped and turned around. With a face full of tears, she pointed at her blonde hair and said to me, "Also, don't call me Cat Lady in the future. I'm from the lion race. Remember, I'm the lion race's Vivian." Chapter 962. Lions and cats belonged to the feline family and had similar appearances. It was the same for the lion race and cat race. When I first met Vivian in Rock City, I instinctively thought that she was from the cat race based on her appearance. I didn't think much about it until today, when I found out that she was actually from the lion race. I looked at the strand of golden hair that she left behind for a long time before carefully placing it into my Xianglu pouch. Everything was peaceful for the next 2 days. After 2 days, the City Lord's mansion sent a notice to lift the ban on the relay station. All half-blood beastmen with the Yalong bloodline could leave. After receiving the notice, Roger immediately came to my room and urged me to leave. After saying that, he wanted to inform Vivian. I called out to him and told him that Vivian had gone to King City. Roger was stunned, but didn't show much surprise. He nodded and said, "She's originally from the royal family. It's normal for her to go back to King City." I smiled wryly. It seemed that Roger also knew Vivian's identity. Only a dabbler of the monster race like me didn't recognize her identity. When I first came to Rapid City, I was curious as to why Roger and Vivian weren't familiar with each other since they were both from the cat race. Now, I understood that it was all my fault. After explaining, Roger asked me when I would be returning to Rock City. Before I could reply, the spirit snake had also received the news and came to my room. I waved my hand to get the spirit snake to stand at the side and not speak. I then said to Roger, "I have other things to do, so I won't be returning to Rock City." "Oh, get him." The dragon race's envoy to arrange a few guards to escort you back. The spirit snake was the dragon race's envoy, so it wasn't a problem for him to borrow a few guards from the City Lord's mansion. Now that Vivian and I had left, it was impossible for Roger to return to Rock City alone. Hearing my words, Roger was startled. It was obvious that he didn't expect me to leave. He also didn't expect that I would use a commanding tone to speak to the spirit snake. I extended my hand and patted his shoulder before continuing. "After returning to Rock City, if it's possible, I hope that you can help me look after Nam. He and your sister are in love with each other after all. Moreover, Nam's future achievements won't be any worse than yours, so it won't be a disgrace to your family." The main reason why I revealed my relationship with the serpent spirit in front of Logue was to endorse Nam. After leaving Rapid City, Nam and I probably wouldn't have the chance to meet again. Although Roger wasn't very strong, he had the bloodline of the dragon race. The cat race itself was also a very strong race. With his protection, Nam should be fine in Rock City. If it was in the past, Roger would definitely get angry at the mention of Nam and his sister. However, looking at the snake spirit who was willing to listen to my orders, Roger realized that my identity wasn't ordinary. After a moment of silence, he nodded his head and agreed. After that, I borrowed 3 Monster King Realm Guard from the City Lord's residence with the spirit snake and left with Roger. The spirit snake and I also left the City Lord's residence and headed out of the city. The next beast summoning ceremony would be held in Wind in the West Province, Wind City. It would be to meet with beasts. From Rapid City to Wind in the Wind in the West Province, we would have to pass through half of the monster domain. The journey was extremely long. For a normal person, they would need the help of Ingzhao beasts and other beasts to travel such a long distance. Even so, there would be countless dangers during the long journey. With the spirit snakes and my cultivation, we didn't need these beasts to travel. If we were to rush at full speed, we would be much faster than these beasts. However, we would have to spend most of our time on the road. Not to mention the spirit snake. Even I wasn't willing to do so. Thus, after we reached the outskirts of the city, we headed straight to the beast farm where the beasts were stored. The spirit snake had traveled a long distance from the dragon territory to get here with a beast to travel with. As the envoy of the dragon race, he naturally wouldn't use normal beasts like Ingzhao beasts or Ingzhao beasts. The spirit snake's beast was called the Dark Dragon. It was a flying beast unique to the dragon race. When I saw the Dark Dragon beast in the beast farm, even I was shocked. The Dark Dragon beast was several times larger than the Ingzhao beasts and had golden feathers all over its body. According to the spirit snake's description, its flying speed was much faster than that of the Ingzhao beasts and Ingzhao beasts. It was good to have such a good transportation tool. However, the spirit snake had arranged for 4 half-beastmen maids on the flying tool and had insisted on bringing them to Wind in the Wind in the city. After being scolded by me, he had reluctantly given up. After we boarded the carriage under the belly of the Dark Dragon beast, the spirit snake gave an order. The Dark Dragon beast let out a long cry and stomped on the ground. Its body rose into the air. It didn't even flap its wings as it flew at high speed, as if it was controlling the wind. The dark dragon beast flew at a much higher altitude than the Yingzhou beasts. Correspondingly, the surrounding environment was much harsher. The astral winds at high altitudes were bone-chilling, and the speed of the wind was extremely fast. It was comparable to a typhoon in the human world. An ordinary person definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. However, it wasn't a problem for the spirit snake and me. We used a bit of our monster power to block the astral winds outside the carriage. The spirit snake was slightly surprised when he saw the monster power surging from my body. He was speechless when he found out that I could absorb monster power, but he didn't ask much about it. The journey was very boring, but we didn't just rush along. I had to rely on the power of a god to make Qiong-Qi recognize me as its master. However, I had used up all of my god's power during the previous ritual. Thus, I had to hunt down ancient demonic saint-level beasts before we reached Wind in the Wind in order to replenish my god's power. At the same time, I had to rely on the beast core to recover my cultivation. Therefore, during the journey, the spirit serpent and I used our divine sense to search every inch of land. Once we found the aura of a sacred beast, we would order the black dragon beast to land, and we would search for it together. After obtaining the beast core, we would continue our journey. Fortunately, the dark dragon beast wasn't like Guhu, who had to use a high cliff to take off. Even though it was bigger, it was more agile and could fly off the ground with just a push of its feet. We didn't encounter any demonic saint beasts in the first few days after we left Rapid City. However, as we moved forward, we got further and further away from the monster race's territory. There were more signs of beast activities. From the third day onwards, we would be able to find around 2 demonic saint beasts every day. After obtaining their beast cores, I would consume them if they possessed the ancient bloodline to stimulate the growth of my god's power. If they didn't possess the ancient bloodline, the spirit snake, and I would consume them to increase our cultivation. In a sense, the beast core was more helpful to the spirit snake. The reason why he had the cultivation of a monster god was because he had consumed a large amount of beast cores after arriving at the monster domain. That was why he had asked me for a bribe when we first met. With a large amount of Earth-level beast cores, the journey became much more exciting. After a month, we left the border of the northern province and entered the western province. After arriving at the western administrative province, although he was still flying through the savage forest, the ferocious beasts he encountered were very different. The number of walking beasts here had obviously decreased by a lot, while the number of flying avian ferocious beasts had increased by a lot. In the forest on the ground, even if there were some walking beasts, most of them had fleshy wings, which looked rather strange. The spirit snake wasn't surprised by such a situation. It told me that the western province was originally under the great rock race's sphere of influence. Most of the beastmen that lived here were of the flying race, and the surrounding ferocious beasts were naturally birds. Apart from this, the beast cores of the beasts here would possess spatial abilities once they reached the mystic grade. It was similar to my Xiang Lu pouch in that it could be used for storage. However, this function was relatively useless. The value of a mystic grade beast core to store items was far less than its original value. Thus, not many people used it. As I listened to the spirit snake's introduction of the mystical features of the western province, I felt that it was quite novel. I urged my spiritual sense to search for traces of monster saint beasts. I planned to hunt a few Earth-level beast cores to bring back to Zhang Canwen, and the others as gifts after leaving this place. This kind of spatial power was extremely rare. Even though the beast cores were valuable, I wouldn't care about them as long as I hunted more of them. After searching for 2 days, we found the first flying beast at the monster saint realm. I immediately urged the dragon crow to descend and prepare to hunt it. However, when we approached, we suddenly heard a panic scream. It was obvious that there were people nearby. Chapter 963. Naturally, I wouldn't think of saving a member of the monster race who was being hunted down. However, this falcon in front of me was our target, so saving this pitiful beast man along the way wasn't a big deal. The spirit snake, and I didn't know anything about the situation in the West Province. It would be best if we could get some information from this fellow. It wasn't convenient for me to use the Xian Yuan sword's power in the presence of the monster race. Thus, I sat on the black dragon boat and pointed, instructing the spirit snake to hunt down the falcon. The spirit snake was of the monster god realm and was also from the dragon race. It was naturally easy for it to deal with a monster saint. After the spirit snake received my order, it jumped out of the boat and reverted to its original form. It quickly caught up to the falcon's side and spat out a mouthful of dragon flames, turning the enormous falcon into a barbecue in midair. Afterwards, it curled its tail and retrieved the beast core from its body. While the spirit snake was hunting the falcon, I controlled the black dragon beast to descend. When the spirit snake retrieved the beast core, I coincidentally landed in front of the beast man, blocking his way. That pitiful fellow was so frightened that he didn't notice the situation behind him. He suddenly saw a huge golden crow appear in front of him. His eyes widened and his face was filled with despair. He didn't even slow down as he continued to rush forward. He bumped into the black dragon beast's leg, and his eyes rolled back as he fainted. I was dumbfounded and didn't have the time to warn him. At this moment, the spirit snake descended from the sky. After transforming back to its human form, it asked me in astonishment, "That fellow shouldn't be an idiot, right?" I couldn't hold back my laughter and waved my hand at the spirit snake. "He should be too frightened. Let's not talk about him first. It's getting late. We'll set up camp here tonight and wait for that fellow to wake up. We'll ask him about the situation in the West Province." With my and the spirit snake's cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for us to fast for a few months. However, there was nothing to do in the long night. I dragged the falcon that was half-cooked by the spirit snake and tore off 2 of its legs. I lit a bonfire and placed it on the fire rack to slowly roast. The quality of a beast's meat was directly proportional to its cultivation. This kind of monster saint realm beast's meat was tender and filled with spiritual power. After roasting it, the taste wouldn't be inferior to the delicacies in the human world. After the spirit snake and I had our fill, the sky quickly darkened. The half-beast man who had fainted finally woke up. He crawled up from the ground and stared at us blankly. He didn't seem to understand the situation and didn't speak for a long while. The spirit snake lazily laid on the ground and asked him, "Brat, you're from the West Province?" Hearing the snake spirit's words, the golden-robed young half-beast man came back to his senses. He glanced at me before turning to look at the snake spirit. He didn't reply to the question, but asked us instead, "Did you kill that green-eyed eagle?" The snake spirit nodded and pointed at the remaining eagle leg on the bonfire. "Yes, the meat quality of this thing is not bad. I'll let you have a taste later." The serpent spirit appeared quite friendly, but the young orc frowned and looked quite furious as he roared, "You dare to steal my prey." I was stunned while the spirit snake was furious. It jumped up from the ground and scolded, "Your prey? If Grandpa hadn't killed it, would you still be standing here? You would have become a pile of its feces." The young beast snorted at the spirit snake's words and shook his head. I purposely lured it into the forest in front of us. I would kill it there, and it wouldn't be able to escape. I had exhausted half of its monster power with great difficulty. Who knew that you would come out and steal it? If you want to eat its meat, its body is yours, but you have to return the beast core to me. The spirit snake was so angry that it stuttered. "We steal it. You? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself first? With your Monster King cultivation, can you kill a monster overlord?" I hadn't paid attention to this young man's cultivation before. After hearing the spirit snake's words, I took a closer look. It was just as the spirit snake had said. He was only a Monster King. There was a huge gap between him and a monster overlord. I didn't know where he got his confidence from a boast so shamelessly. Logically speaking, even if he couldn't see the snake spirit's identity as a dragon, he should be able to realize that our cultivation was not ordinary from the fact that we could easily kill this eagle beast with the cultivation of a monster saint. I was really curious as to where he got the confidence to pester us. Hearing the spirit snake's doubt, the young beast revealed a disdainful expression. He said arrogantly to the spirit snake, "What's wrong with Monster King cultivation? Don't you know that a noble bloodline can ignore the difference in cultivation?" The spirit snake was from the dragon race and had the noblest bloodline in the dragon race, the ancient winged dragon bloodline. Saying such words in front of the spirit snake was no different from telling a joke. The spirit snake laughed in anger. "You're talking to me about bloodline? What bloodline do you have? Rat or earthworm?" The young beast looked at the spirit snake in disdain, as though he didn't want to get too close to the spirit snake. He intentionally took 2 steps back before shaking his head and continued, "You don't know anything about noble bloodlines. I can forgive your ignorance. Hand over the beast core, and I'll treat it as if nothing happened today." This time, not to mention the spirit snake, even I couldn't help but laugh. This young beast was much stronger than the spirit snake when it came to infuriating people. Moreover, from his expression, it didn't seem like he was intentionally infuriating people, but he really thought that way. The spirit snake was speechless for quite a while. He simply turned to look at me and said while panting, "I want to kill him. Don't stop me." I waved my hand. "Up to you." Although we needed information, we could just capture a few more people in the vast western province to interrogate. It was better to leave this arrogant young man to the spirit snake to vent his anger. After getting my permission, the spirit snake grinned maliciously and walked over to attack. Seeing that we were really going to attack, the young beast finally panicked. He took 2 steps back and pointed at the spirit snake before shouting, "You dare to attack me? If I lose even a single strand of hair, the entire rock race won't let you off. They will chase you to the ends of the earth to find you. Then, Grandpa will exterminate your rock race." The spirit snake sneered coldly and raised his hand to take his life. I furrowed my brows and stopped the spirit snake. Previously, I understood the situation of the western province from Nam. The monster emperor that ruled this place was the Great Pung race's monster emperor. The rock race was the royal race of the Great Pung race. The Great Pung race's monster emperor was actually a member of the rock race. Since this brat was from the rock race, he might be related to the monster emperor. No wonder he was so arrogant. The spirit snake didn't understand why I stopped him. He turned around and looked at me angrily. I waved my hand to calm him down. I walked forward and looked at the young rock race member. I asked, "What's your relationship with the monster emperor Tunga?" After hearing me mention the monster emperor of the rock race, that fellow became arrogant again. He raised his nose and replied, "The monster emperor Tunga is my grandpa. Now, you know about my bloodline, right? I advise you to hand over the beast core obediently, and I'll treat it as if nothing has happened. Otherwise, you won't be able to withstand the fury of the rock race." He was actually the grandson of the monster emperor. I instantly became happy. In that case, he would know the situation of the western province and even the monster emperor of the rock race. This would save me a lot of trouble. My first reaction was to kill him and search his soul. However, after thinking about it, the monster emperor of the rock race might have set up a restriction on his body. If the monster emperor was alarmed, the spirit snake and I wouldn't be able to deal with him for the time being. I couldn't kill him, but there were many ways to make him obedient. It wasn't necessary to search his soul. After thinking for a while, I asked the spirit snake to hang this fellow in front of the black dragon beast's mouth. Even though the black dragon beast was obedient in front of the dragon race, it was an extremely ferocious beast. It wouldn't be a problem to scare him half to death when facing the black dragon beast's bloody mouth for an entire night. Apart from that, the black dragon beast was a ferocious beast of the fire attribute. Its nose and mouth were extremely hot. It wouldn't feel good to be roasted for an entire night. If this fellow could endure for an entire night without collapsing, I'll find another ferocious beast to play with him tomorrow. There's still a long way to go to the Wind's Breath City, and he would definitely collapse one day. Looking at the spirit snake, sending him to the black dragon beast's mouth, the young rock race panicked. He tried to put up a strong front while feeling weak inside. "What are you trying to do? If you dare to harm me, my grandpa won't let you off. Our rock race will chase you to the ends of the world and exterminate your entire race." Chapter 964. It was ridiculous to say the word exterminate to the dragon race. Moreover, the snake spirit didn't hide his identity. Whether it was the black dragon's mount or the dragon horn on his head, they could prove his identity. Previously, the young man of the rock race hadn't thought about it. However, after hearing the snake spirit's introduction, he seemed to have realized it. He immediately shut his mouth and let the snake spirit hang him in front of the black dragon's mouth without saying a word. I didn't know if he was scared out of his wits, but he didn't say anything after he was hung up. It gave us some peace and quiet. We sat by the bonfire and chatted until midnight. Then, we went to sleep. The next morning, after the snake spirit and I woke up, we went to check on the guy hanging from the black dragon's mouth. We were surprised to find that he was sleeping soundly. Although the black dragon's hot breath had curled his hair, he looked comfortable and calm. He didn't look like he was hanging from the mouth of a ferocious beast, but more like he was lying on his own bed. It seemed that the frightening method that I had thought of last night wasn't suitable for him. I asked the snake's spirit to wake him up. I untied the rope and brought him to me. The snake's spirit held grudges. After I brought him to me, I said sarcastically, "How was it? Did you sleep well last night?" The young rock race member shook his head. It's normal for us rock race to eat wind and drink dew. Of course, it wasn't comfortable to be hung for a night, but it wasn't torture either. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, which made the snake's spirit uncomfortable. He continued to say sarcastically, "So, after thinking for a night, do you still want to exterminate our dragon race?" No one can exterminate the noble dragon race. I apologize for what I said yesterday. After being rejected twice in a row, the snake spirit's anger could no longer be vented. It was very depressed. I looked at him from the side and found it interesting. Yesterday, he was arrogant and cocky. Today, he had completely changed. Since he was being reasonable, I didn't need to make things difficult for him. I smiled and sat next to him. I asked about his origin and the reason why he was here. As I had said yesterday, he was the direct grandson of the rock race's monster emperor Tangair. His name was Bart. The rock race had a custom. During the coming-of-age ceremony, they had to capture an eagle-type ferocious beast. Because eagle-type vicious beasts were very difficult to capture, most people of the Great Pung clan would choose vicious beasts that were at the same level or lower than their own. As for Bart, who was the demon emperor's biological grandson, although he only had the cultivation of a demon king, he was very ambitious and directly chose the green-eyed eagle, which was in the demon saint realm. That was why he had traveled thousands of miles from Wind's Breath City to this remote border area. When we saw him yesterday, he really wasn't bluffing. He really was trying to capture the green-eyed eagle. However, because his cultivation was too low, he couldn't face the green-eyed eagle head-on. He wanted to lure the green-eyed eagle into the trap he had set up in the forest. He wanted to exhaust the green-eyed eagle's strength first, and then he would hunt it. In that case, we wronged him yesterday. Of course, I wouldn't apologize to him. I changed the topic and asked about the situation in Wind End City. At this moment, Bart told us everything he knew and immediately started to explain. He told us that Wind Breath City was a city that floated in the sky. Because it was so high, even the wind had to stop here. That was why it was called Wind Breath City. Floating in the sky. That sounded interesting. I couldn't help but recall the floating island that I had seen in Chi Yu's skull tomb. Could it be that Wind Breath City was also a floating city like that? Thinking about it, it was unbelievable. The floating island in Chi Yu's tomb was only the size of a few houses. As long as there was power to support it, it wouldn't be difficult for it to float in the sky. Wind Breath City was one of the largest cities in the monster region. With the size of Rapid City, it was at least dozens of square kilometers. How much power was needed to support such a large city that floated in the sky? As I was lost in thought, the spirit snake came over and asked me how we should deal with Bart. He had an eager look on his face, and it was obvious that he didn't have any good intentions. I shook my head. With Bart's identity, we couldn't kill him. Since he was willing to cooperate, there was no need to torture him. It would be better to let him bring us to Wine Breath City to get in touch with the rock race's monster emperor to understand the second ancient beast. Of course, with my identity, I temporarily couldn't get in touch with the monster emperor. This matter could only be handled by the spirit snake. With his identity as a dragon, it shouldn't be difficult for him to participate in this matter. As such, the spirit snake could only follow him back. I would need to find an opportunity to avoid the monster emperor and sneak into the ritual to awaken the beast, just like what I had done in Rapid City. With a plan in mind, I instructed the spirit snake to bring Bart back to Winebreath City. The spirit snake unwillingly agreed. However, Bart told me that he had to first hunt a green-eyed eagle. If he couldn't complete this adult trial, he wouldn't be able to return home. I immediately took out the green-eyed eagle's beast pill. Who knew that he would shake his head and say that this trial could only be completed with one's own power? Yesterday, he was still urging us to give him the beast pill. Today, he was so serious. I smiled and didn't fuss over it. There was still some time before the ritual to awaken the beast in Windbreath City, so there was no need to hurry. I told Bart that we would help him find another green-eyed eagle and give him 3 days to hunt it. It would be best if he could succeed. If he couldn't succeed in 3 days, then there was no need to waste any more time and just take the beast pill to report back. Bart thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. Thus, the three of us boarded the boat and urged the black dragon beast to set off. According to Bart, the green-eyed eagle was the most commonly seen mythical beast here. Adding to the fact that the dark dragon beast was extremely fast, it didn't take long for us to leave the territory of the green-eyed eagle. In the afternoon, I detected the aura of another mythical beast. I urged the dark dragon beast over to take a look. It was indeed another green-eyed eagle. After Bart informed me, he immediately jumped off the boat. The spirit snake, and I changed direction to look for the other monster saint beast. My cultivation had yet to fully recover, and I didn't have much God's power left. We couldn't stay idle during this period of time. As for Bart, I left a Dao Chi imprint on him, so I didn't have to worry about him escaping. 3 days passed by in the blink of an eye. The snake spirit and I didn't stay idle. With the help of the black dragon beast and the green-eyed eagle, we obtained a total of 8 Earth-grade beast cores, 2 of which contained ancient bloodlines. These 8 beast pills allowed my cultivation to recover slightly, and I was already very close to the monster god realm. My god's power had also recovered quite a bit and formed a golden ball of light in my body. Combined with the situation when we faced the Cheongchi beast, this golden ball of light should be enough. After 3 days, the spirit snake and I returned to the place where we parted ways. We followed the aura of the Dao Chi imprint and found Bart. At this moment, Bart was extremely miserable. There was a big hole in his abdomen, and his whole body was covered in green blood. Beside him was the corpse of a huge green-eyed eagle. There was also a hole in the green-eyed eagle's chest. Bart should have obtained the beast pill from there. At this moment, he was holding it tightly in his hand. Even though he was severely injured and was on the verge of death, there was still a smile on his pale face, and he seemed to be extremely happy. I frowned. Even though he had successfully killed the green-eyed eagle, his injuries were extremely severe, and it was extremely likely that it would affect his cultivation in the future. The result of this kind of trial was almost meaningless. After walking over to check on his situation, I asked him, "You're severely injured, and it's possible that you won't be able to increase your cultivation in the future. Is it worth it for a moment of glory?" Bart spat out a mouthful of blood before replying with a chuckle. "Of course it's worth it. We can talk about my future cultivation in the future. I've already achieved my goal, haven't I?" He was really open-minded. I shook my head. Even though we met by chance, there was something about this brat that I admired. Moreover, we still needed to make use of him. There was no harm in helping him. I didn't say much and mobilized the god's power in my body. A golden thread separated from the golden ball of light and shot into his body with a flick of my finger. Chapter 965. The god's power could even repair fate palaces, so it was a piece of cake for Bart's injuries. In just a few minutes, the hole in his abdomen started to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, it returned to its original state. His demonic power had also completely recovered and was much stronger than before. He was just a step away from breaking through to the demonic saint realm. Bart was completely shocked by this miraculous scene. He looked at me in a daze and couldn't react for a long time. I also felt that it was strange as Bart's cultivation was at the intermediate stage of the demonic king realm. With the mystical power of the god's power, I originally thought that I could help him break through to the demonic saint realm. I didn't expect him to only reach the complete realm of the demonic king realm. As I had already told the spirit snake about my arrangements, he walked out and unhappily patted Bart's shoulder. "Don't just stand there. Hurry up and board the carriage. Bring Grandpa Long to Wind's End City." Bart ignored him and bowed towards me. It was obvious that he wanted to express his gratitude. However, before he could open his mouth, the spirit snake grabbed him by the shoulder and threw him onto the Dark Dragon Beast boat. He also jumped onto the boat. After the Dark Dragon Beast set off, he waved at me and said, "See you at Wind's End City." They left first. I didn't hurry on with my journey, but traveled slowly as I continued to hunt for beasts in the forest. The Earth-grade beast core would greatly increase my cultivation. There was still some time before the second beast in Wind's End City would awaken. I couldn't waste this period of time, so it was naturally best to use it to increase my cultivation. In merely half a month's time, I've obtained over 10 Earth-grade beast cores, and after consuming them, my cultivation has smoothly recovered to the demon god realm. This means that the injuries I suffered earlier have completely healed, and my cultivation has completely recovered to the level I was at all those years ago. In a split second, the sun god in my fate palace returned to my senses. The god's power that was hidden within had completely recovered. From then on, I finally didn't need to rely on the beast core's power to activate the god's power. After being stranded in the monster region for more than a year, I finally had the feeling that I could control my own fate. Of course, I wasn't satisfied with just this. In the demon domain, there were still enemies like the 4 great demon sovereigns. Only by reaching the demon sovereign realm could I guarantee that I would be able to move freely in the demon domain. After half a month of trekking, I was not far from Wind's Breath City. However, I did not waste time and continued to search for traces of ferocious beasts every day. However, it was different from before. With the help of the sun god, I was no longer satisfied with demon saint ferocious beasts. Instead, I set my sights on demon god ferocious beasts of the same realm. The higher the level of the fierce beasts, the fewer they would be. This was the law of nature. After searching for several days, I finally found a 4-legged giant bird exuding the aura of a monster god at the edge of a cliff. This bird beast had 4 legs under its abdomen, and its body was several meters long. However, it was bony and looked like a skeleton. Its mouth was extremely long, and jagged sharp teeth protruded from the edge. It looked like a bird from the ancient dinosaur era. Demon god ferocious beasts had keen senses. As I approached, the strange-looking bird beast immediately sensed that something was wrong. After glancing in my direction, it let out a long cry and spread its huge wings. It seemed to have sensed my killing intent and charged at me. I flashed and disappeared from where I stood. After avoiding its attack, I appeared on its back. Monster energy surged out from my fingertips and turned into a 3-foot-long sword as I slashed at its neck. The bird beast did not sit still and wait for its death. The messy feathers on its body suddenly stood up and left its body shooting outwards. This move was beyond my expectations. In my haste, I had no time to defend myself. I once again used the power of the sun god to shift my body, circling to the front of its body. There were no flying feathers here, and it was enough to decapitate it. This time, nothing unexpected happened. When the long sword made of monster energy pierced the bird beast's neck, it opened its mouth, as if it was preparing some kind of power. However, as my monster energy exploded in its body, everything came to an abrupt halt. I had successfully reached the monster god realm, and with the help of the sun god, my combat power had increased a lot. However, the bird beast in front of me had just reached the monster god realm. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy to deal with. After the bird beast breathed its last, I took out a light yellow beast core from its body. Generally speaking, monster god ferocious beasts and monster saint ferocious beasts produced earth-level beast cores. In the legends, there were monster god ferocious beasts that produced heaven-level beast cores. However, I was not so lucky today. Although they were both Earth-level beast cores, the quality was obviously different. The surface of this light yellow beast core faintly emitted a glimmer of light. From time to time, there would be small whirlpools around it. Just by looking at it, one could see that it was extraordinary. The beast cores of ferocious beasts in the Western Province mostly had the power of space. Previously, I had tested the beast cores of monster, Saint Ferocious beasts, and found that they could only store less than 1 liter of things. They were quite useless, so I did not keep them. At this time, I concentrated on sensing the beast core of the monster god ferocious beasts in my hand. Soon, a space the size of half a room unfolded in my consciousness. 30 to 40 liters of space was enough to store several horses at the same time. This storage capacity was not inferior to my Xianglu pouch. Moreover, when I held this beast core in my hand, there was a layer of soft wind that constantly appeared around me. While cooling the body, it could also cleanse the body. It was very magical. If there was a chance, I would hunt down as many monster god ferocious beasts as possible and collect some of these beast cores to bring back to Zhang Canwen and Lil Wangli as gifts. However, I still had to swallow the one in my hand to increase my cultivation as quickly as possible. Compared to the human realm, the greatest advantage of the mountain and sea realm was the ferocious beasts and their beast cores. It provided a shortcut to increase one's cultivation. Of course, this kind of increase wasn't without limits. First, it depended on one's endurance. If I gave the Earth-level beast core to Na Mu to swallow, what awaited him definitely wouldn't be a rapid increase in his cultivation, but rather an explosion of his body due to being unable to withstand the power of the beast core. However, I didn't have to worry about this situation. My cultivation in the human realm had already established a solid foundation for me. After the beast core entered my stomach, the surging monster chi caused my body to float in the air. I swayed in midair and floated along with the wind. This state lasted for a full hour before I finally absorbed all of the beast dance power. After I woke up, I looked at my surroundings. This hour hadn't delayed my journey at all. The direction that I had been flying in was the direction that I was rushing towards. After absorbing the beast core, my cultivation had increased by a large margin. I was advancing towards the middle stage of the monster god realm, which was the middle stage of the rush realm. My body was in midair, and I didn't land on the ground. I circulated the monster chi in my body and borrowed the power of the wind to fly towards Wind Breath City. At the same time, my spiritual sense spread out in all directions to search for the auras of monster gods and ferocious beasts. After another 5 days, I finally neared Wind Breath City. During this process, I only found one monster god beast and obtained the second beast core. This time, I didn't rush to swallow it, but kept it on me in case I needed it. Seeing that I was about to reach Wind Breath City, the auras of the high-level ferocious beasts in the surroundings had disappeared. The monster gods and ferocious beasts were nowhere to be found. I stopped searching and prepared to enter the city to meet up with the spirit snake. There wasn't any city in the vicinity. In front of me was a tall mountain whose peak couldn't be seen. According to the information that Bart had provided, Wind Breath City was at the top of this mountain. At that time, he had told me that Wind Breath City was a floating city in the sky. Even the wind had to stop here. It seemed like it was because of the high terrain. This mountain was at least a few hundred kilometers in circumference. There was no one at the foot of the mountain. I was too lazy to climb, so I just flew up and headed towards the peak. No wonder Bart had said that Wind Breath City was a city where even the wind had to stop here. I flew up close to 10,000 meters before reaching the peak. When my feet stepped on the peak, I looked forward and was shocked. It wasn't as I had imagined. That Wind Breath City was at the peak. In truth, the peak was desolate and empty. Not far in front of me was a giant hole. This mountain was completely hollow, and the hole in the center was a few hundred kilometers wide. It was like a giant cave that connected to hell. Chapter 966. A city that floated in the sky naturally required flying to enter. The monster region was the same as the human world. Only when one reached Sky Master cultivation would one have the ability to fly in the void. It was the same for the beastmen, who were related to the flying beasts. Thus, apart from some servants and beastmen that were born in Windbreath City, the other beastmen that appeared in Windbreath City were at least Monster King. With my current cultivation, the Demon King realm, or the Celestial Master realm, is just like an ant. But in fact, for both the Human Clan and the Demon Clan, this level of cultivation is completely beyond that of an ordinary person. Take the Sade Academy in Rock City as an example. Every year, only a dozen or so people can graduate with the cultivation of Demon King. Such a huge rock city could only produce around 20 Monster Kings every year. In this Wind Breath City, the lowest cultivation in the city was Monster King. This was a terrifying fact, but it also piqued my interest. After observing for a while, I didn't notice any guards. I used the shifting ink pearl to erase my dog-headed appearance and reverted to a normal human's appearance. To the monster race, Monster King realm could completely transform into a human form. A dog-headed man appearing here would attract too much attention. After adjusting my appearance, I stepped on the ground and flew up. I quickly arrived on top of the floating boulder and looked forward. From below, it was just a majestic and desolate boulder, but from above, it was a huge and prosperous city, even more so than Rapid City. I swiftly flew over and landed at the edge of the huge rock. With the advantage of floating in the sky, Wind Breath City didn't even have city walls. Correspondingly, there weren't any guards. As long as one could fly up, they were free to pass. However, at the edge of the huge rock, there were a few passageways for flying beasts to land. There were many soldiers there. They were probably on guard against people that came through the flying beasts. After walking for a few hundred meters, I saw a few short houses on both sides of the road. There were silhouettes moving in and out of the houses. I swept my gaze over them and discovered that their cultivations were all below the Monster King rank. It seemed that these were the residences of the servants and family members. This was similar to a huge city in the human world. Usually, there would be some slums in the secluded areas outside the city. The prosperous cities belonged to the residents of the cities, while those who did not belong to the prosperous cities lived outside. As expected, as they continued forward, the scenery around them rapidly changed. First, a few huge manors appeared, followed by bustling streets and bustling markets. When I arrived at these places, I looked at the passers-by again. They were basically all at the Monster King realm and above. After arriving here, I finally realized how powerful the monster race was. A city full of Monster Kings was equivalent to a city full of heavenly masters. Just thinking about it made my scalp go numb. Based on general experience, it was a matter, of course, for more outstanding individuals to emerge from a group of elites. So, in the Wind's Breath City, there were definitely many demon sages and demon gods. Although those below the Demon Emperor level couldn't see through my disguise, but compared to Rapid City, I still had to be more careful. After wandering a few rounds on the streets, I swiftly came to a place near the center of the city and found an inn to stay in. In a city that didn't have any walls or guards, the atmosphere was obviously very free. The process of checking into the inn was also very smooth. There wasn't any interrogation at all. After handing over a profound level B stand, I moved into the best room on the top floor. Sitting in the room, after opening the window, I could even see the golden Pung statue in the middle of the city square, as well as the city lord's mansion on the other side of the square. From the square, the statue, and the city lord's mansion, it seemed that the city lord's mansion was free and unrestrained. The structure of the city was no different from the other cities in the monster region. After a night of rest, I felt much more refreshed the next day. Perhaps it was because Wind's Breath City was floating above the clouds. Not long after I woke up, the snake spirit found an inn. The snake spirit and I had left a mark on each other's body. Moreover, I had purposely chosen an inn that was close to the city lord's mansion. It was normal for him to sense my arrival, so it was reasonable for him to come looking for me. But what I didn't expect was that the prince of the rock race, Bart, who I had met on the way, would come together with the snake spirit. Back in the wilderness, He was just a young man who had fallen into misfortune. But in Wind's Breath City, he was the grandson of the rock race's monster emperor, the prince of the entire rock race. So, his arrival had caused the inn to be guarded by a group of sturdy monster Saint Realm soldiers. In Wind's Breath City, where the Monster King's percentage was almost 100%, the Monster Saint Realm was probably the lowest standard for a soldier. I looked at Bart, who had 2 Monster God Realm bodyguards by his side, with a helpless expression. I could tell that he had followed the snake spirit here to maintain a friendly attitude towards me. But I was hiding in the monster region, so what I was most afraid of was being noticed by others. I was even more afraid of being noticed by the Monster Emperor. With such a large entourage, even if it didn't attract his grandfather's attention, I probably wouldn't be able to stay in such an excellent inn. The snake spirit chuckled as he walked to my side and sat down. Bart stood respectfully in front of me. After bowing, he said emotionally, "Thank you, mister, for giving me a new lease of life." Bart is extremely grateful. Bart has offended Mister during our previous interactions. I hope Mister can forgive me. Previously, when I had helped to heal his injuries, I had the intention to make use of him. I had already expected that he would repay me after I had shown him kindness. However, I had to say that his respectful attitude had exceeded my expectations. Before I could ask, Bart took it upon himself to explain it to me. According to him, even though he was the prince of the rock race and the biological grandson of the great rock monster emperor, his mother was of humble origin, which caused his bloodline to be impure. Moreover, his mother had been severely injured when she was pregnant with him, which caused his body to be extremely weak. His body had accumulated an evil aura that even the great rock monster emperor couldn't do anything about. It was because of his bloodline and injuries that caused his cultivation speed to be extremely slow. After reaching the Monster King realm, it was even more difficult for him to advance. He even suffered from various discrimination in his family. Even though the great rock monster emperor doted on him, the monster race revered power. Under the situation where he lacked power, even if the great rock monster emperor doted on him, it wouldn't change his status. The great rock race did have the custom of hunting ferocious beasts during the coming of age ceremony. However, for the other royal families, it was absolutely impossible for them to be thrown into the wilderness alone and risk their lives to complete the arduous trial. To put it bluntly, the reason why he had met us in the wilderness previously was due to his awkward status. These misfortunes were closely related to Bart's birth and bloodline. They were shackles that he would never be able to shake off in his life. But what was miraculous was that in just half a month, Bart's world had undergone earth-shattering changes. First of all, his cultivation had inexplicably increased to the Monster Saint realm. It should be known that he, who had the bloodline of the rock race, possessed the cultivation of the Monster King at the age of 12. After that, the members of his race had all entered the Monster Saint realm within a few years. However, he had barely reached the intermediate stage of the Monster King realm when he was an adult. Even his grandfather had once said that it was highly likely that he would stop at the Monster King realm for the rest of his life. Apart from his cultivation, what made Bart even more ecstatic was that the evil aura that had been entrenched in his body, which even the Monster Emperor couldn't do anything about, had also inexplicably disappeared. At the same time, his originally complicated bloodline had become extremely pure overnight. It was even more noble than the others in the race, carrying a mysterious ancient aura. With the help of this bloodline, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe the speed of his cultivation in the past few days as 1,000 miles a day. Chapter 9, 67. No one knew better than me the reason for the changes in Bart's body. The god's power was the power of the monster Emperorling. It was the true power of the gods, especially for the monster race. The rock race's bloodline might be strong, but it was nothing in front of the monster Emperorling's power. Hence, the changes in Bart's bloodline and the recovery of his injuries were all natural after I bestowed him the god's power. Even though Bart didn't know about the existence of the god's power, he knew who brought it to him. Hence, The arrogant young man had disappeared, leaving only the great rock race prince who was deeply grateful to me and even respected me as an elder. From the current situation, my plan to buy people's hearts was a huge success. With the help of the snake spirit and Bart, it shouldn't be a problem to awaken the ferocious beasts in Wind's Breath City. However, I didn't feel much better and instead frowned. The changes in Bart's body would definitely attract the attention of the great rock race's monster emperor Tinger. He might not be able to resist the god's power, but he would definitely be able to sense that it was a much stronger power than him. Under such circumstances, he would definitely be interested in me. If he knew that I was in Wind's Breath City, he would definitely spy on me and even kidnap me to meet him. Under such circumstances, my cover would be completely exposed. With the war between the human world and the monster region on the verge of breaking out, I probably wouldn't be able to return to the human world. After Bart finished his explanation, I said to him in a deep voice, "This is indeed my help to you, but at the same time, it's also your good fortune. You don't have to thank me. If you really want to repay me, I only have one request, which is to hide my existence. Don't tell anyone, especially your grandfather." I didn't beat around the bush and directly stated my request. After hearing my words, Bart subconsciously hesitated for a moment, but he quickly nodded and agreed. From his previous gratitude towards me, it shouldn't be a problem for him to help me hide my existence. Hence, I didn't say anything more and nodded, indicating that he could leave. Bart stood there without moving. Instead, he looked hesitant, as though he was making a decision in his heart. Without waiting for me to ask, he suddenly knelt in front of me and respectfully kowtowed to me. Then, he cupped his fists and said to me, "Senior, I want to worship you as my master." This scene was truly out of my expectations. After remaining silent for a moment, I shook my head. "Your grandfather is the monster emperor and has an exceedingly high cultivation. Why do you have to seek me as your teacher?" From the bottom of my heart, I didn't approve of the monster race. Other than Nam, who had saved my life, I didn't want to be involved with any other monster race. Even with the identity of the monster emperor, my first reaction was to reject him. Bart shook his head. It was clear that he didn't agree with my words. He saluted once more before saying, "My grandfather's cultivation base was exceedingly high, but Senior was able to change my bloodline with just a wave of your hand. This is something that even my grandfather was unable to do. Our rock clan considers ourselves to be the children of the heavens, and we believe in the connection between man and the heavens. Meeting with Senior must have been the guidance of the heavens. So, Senior, please accept me as your disciple." After that, he kowtowed 3 times on the ground. The thing that changed Bart's bloodline was the monster emperor's godly powers. However, only I could control such powers, so it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was my power. I hesitated as my right index finger unconsciously tapped on the table. Bart didn't dare to speak further as he saw that I was contemplating. He lowered his head and waited silently. I came to Wine Breath City for the awakening of the ferocious beasts. If I were to accept Bart as my disciple, it would definitely be of great help to me. However, the inheritance of a master and disciple was a sacred matter to anyone. Once he had a status and my identity was exposed, how would he deal with himself? How would I face him? Bart was different from Nam. Nam was only a small houndhead man. Even if I had changed his bloodline and allowed him to stand out in Rock City, Nam was still a small character in the monster region. There were many things that he didn't have to bear. Even if the war between the human race and the monster region broke out, it wouldn't affect him because of my identity. Bart was from the royal family of Windbreath City. If I were to accept him as my disciple, he would definitely grow rapidly with my help. It wouldn't be surprising for him to become another great rock race monster emperor. At that time, he would even have to bear the fate of the entire monster region. This was a completely predictable situation. Under such circumstances, it was unwise to accept him as a disciple. After understanding all of this, I was prepared to reject him. However, I hesitated as the words reached my mouth. I had lived in a human world since young and had always considered problems from the perspective of the human race. However, in reality, I carried the souls of Emperor Ku and Monster Emperor June. From a certain perspective, I was a mixture of the human race and a monster race. If I were to abandon my human standpoint, what would I think of the human race and the monster race? I silently looked at Bart, but my mind was already focused on the fate of the human and monster race. The first scene that appeared in my mind was the mural that I saw when I returned to the Fire God Temple after the opening of the mountain and sea realm. In the mural, Xin Yuan, Xin Nong, Monster Emperor Jun, and Qiyu, these ancient gods were sitting together, quietly discussing something. Ever since I had started thinking about the fate of the human and monster race, this scene had been hovering in my mind, unable to disperse. I pondered in silence for an hour. The spirit snake and Bart also waited for me for an hour. After a long time, my eyes regained their focus. I didn't directly reject Bart, but asked him, "Do you know about the opening of the monster region and the human world?" Bart was stunned by my sudden question. He immediately replied, "I've heard Uncle mention this before. What do you think of the human race?" I continued to ask, "The human race?" Bart seemed slightly confused. He muttered to himself for a moment before shaking his head. "I've only heard that the human race used to exist in the monster region, but they became extinct. As for the human race in the human world, since they aren't of our race, I'm afraid that a great war will be inevitable in the future." I nodded. Bart's words weren't out of my expectations. In fact, my view of the monster race had greatly changed in the 2 years I had been in the monster region. In my previous impression, the monster race was an extremely vicious beast that devoured humans. But now it seemed that besides their bloodline, appearance, and lifestyle, there wasn't much of a difference between them and the human race. And from the monster race that I had come into contact with, there were very few vicious people and many kind people. Since that was the case, why did there have to be a great war? Or rather, what was the point of such a great war? The opening of the mountain and sea realm had already brought about a world-ending disaster to the human world. If there was another great war, how many people would survive? Although the monster region hadn't suffered a disaster, the human race definitely wouldn't allow themselves to be trampled upon. After the war, even if the monster race won, they would definitely suffer great losses. There definitely wouldn't be a winner in a war, so there was no need for it to happen. I raised my head and glanced at the roof, the corners of my mouth curling into a cold smile. I lowered my head and said to Bart, "I can accept you as my disciple, but I have a condition. You can't be restricted by your identity as a monster race. You can't have racial hatred, and you must treat the human race and monster race equally. Can you do that?" Bart obviously hadn't expected such a request from me. He was silent for a moment, but didn't answer my question. Instead, he asked in surprise, "Senior, could it be that you're a human?" This kid was somewhat quick-witted, but I shook my head. "My identity is a bit special, so there's no need to hide it from you. I'm both a human and a monster." Bart naturally didn't understand my words, but he didn't feel too conflicted. He quickly put on a serious expression and said, "Senior, you've given me a new lease on life. If it wasn't for Senior's kindness, I wouldn't have any future to speak of. So please don't worry, Senior. I swear on my bloodline that I will never have any thoughts of racial differences in my life. Senior, please help your disciple." Chapter 968. Bart left contentedly. The mystical power of the monster the arch made him respect me even more than his grandfather. After he left, the snake spirit asked, "Why did you take that kid in? He's so young, and he dares to swear that he doesn't care about his bloodline. I don't think he's reliable." I shook my head. His background is complicated. Although he's young and he's arrogant, he's mature. He agreed to my request after much consideration. Moreover, there isn't any irreconcilable conflict between the monster race and the human race. I'm just planting a seed in his heart. In the future, when the two races come into contact, the seed in his heart will sprout. It will be a good thing. The snake spirit didn't care about worldly affairs. He was just casually saying that. Seeing that I didn't agree with his point of view, he shrugged and changed the topic. These days, I have found out that the fierce beast that will be awakening in Wind's Breath City is a Tao Tai. The time will be in a week. The Dragon Clan specially sent someone over to handle this matter. I am not familiar with him, but after I revealed my identity, he agreed to let me join the ceremony. Previously, I had sent the snake spirit to Wine Breath City so that he could find out more about the beast awakening ceremony. It seemed like the snake spirit was reliable. Tao Tai was one of the 4 vicious beasts. It was known as gluttonous and was probably the most famous of the 4. Later generations would call it gluttonous. Its original appearance was recorded in the classic of Mountains and Seas. It has the body of a goat and the face of a human. Its eyes are under the armpit. It has the teeth of a tiger and the claws of a human. Its voice is like that of a baby. As I thought about the information on Tao Tai, the snake spirit continued to explain, I've seen the godly instrument that the monster race is going to use to awaken Tao Tai. It's the Kunlun mirror, and it wasn't snatched by the monster race. I was stunned when I heard the words Kunlun mirror. The Kongtong seal that was used to awaken Xiongqi in Rapid City belonged to the old president. I didn't care about it, but the Kunlun mirror was a godly instrument that Nangong had kept. He had used the Kunlun mirror to travel through time and space to come to this era. However, the snake spirit said that the Kunlun mirror wasn't snatched by the monster race. What did that mean? Seeing my confusion, the spirit snake didn't keep me in suspense and continued. I met Nangong in the city lord's mansion. He should have taken the initiative to send the Kunlun mirror to the monster race. I was shocked. Nangong was a descendant of the Flame Emperor, and he had wanted to open the mountain and sea realm for the sake of the Shinong tribe. After the mountain and sea realm was opened, the Magi had been on the verge of extinction. Logically speaking, he should have hated the demon clan. Why would he take the initiative to give the demon clan a god item to help them awaken? He's in the city lord's mansion now? Did you talk to him? Do you know why he sent the Kunlun mirror here? The snake spirit shook her head. He didn't recognize me, and I didn't know what his purpose was, so I didn't contact him. I pondered and thought of many reasons, but none of them could explain Nangong's actions. After pondering for a long time, I decided to ignore him for the time being. The most important thing now was to control the ferocious beasts. Only then would we have the power to counter the monster race. No matter what Nangong's purpose in coming to the monster race was, what I needed to do couldn't be affected. After dealing with the ferocious beasts, if there was a chance, it wouldn't be too late to contact him. After making my decision, I told the snake spirit to be careful and not to have too much contact with Nangong. However, I could ask around in the city lord mansion. The snake spirit accepted my order and didn't stay in the inn for long. Soon, he returned to the city lord's mansion. I also left the inn and looked for a nearby place to stay. Bart's identity was special, and he had come to find me with great fanfare. It was inevitable that he would attract some curious gazes. To be cautious, I had to find another place to stay. Time flew by, and a week passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, I met Bart once in the tavern outside the city lord's mansion. From the death scripture and the Xianmin sect's ancient records, I each chose a combat technique and a breathing technique to impart to him. The combat magical technique was called Indestructible Taoist Body. It was a magical technique recorded in the 2nd chapter of the death scripture. It could guide the Taoist Qi to fuse with the body, stimulating the strongest power of the body. It was suitable for beastmen with robust physiques. As for the breathing technique, it was a mysterious sex mental cultivation technique that I had seen in the heavenly abode. The ancient aura in the monster's territory was very dense, and the cultivation environment was much better than in the human world. Under such circumstances, the common cultivation techniques in the monster's territory were very shallow. This breathing technique would be very useful for Bart to increase his realm. After obtaining these 2 miraculous cultivation techniques, Bart admired me even more. He even hinted to me that I could ask him for help if I needed any help, even if it was related to the rock race. I had originally intended to ask him to help me sneak into the ferocious beast's awakening ceremony. However, after thinking about it, I didn't need Bart's help, so I shook my head and declined his good intentions. On the day of the official awakening of the Tao Tai, ferocious beast. The spirit snake carried an unconscious half-beast man to my room in the inn before the sky brightened. Similar to the awakening ceremony in Rapid City, the ceremony this time also required the use of some beastmen with the dragon race's bloodline. The one brought by the snake spirit was one of them. I used the ink pearl to change my appearance and hide my aura. After that, I followed the snake spirit to the city lord's mansion and blended into the crowd of beastmen that were participating in the ceremony. The rest of the journey was very smooth. Just like in Rapid City, the snake spirit and the other dragon race's emissary presided over the awakening ceremony, while I followed a group of lesser dragon beastmen to participate in it. When the ceremony officially started, I saw Nangong on the rostrum with my own eyes. He stood beside the snake spirit and waited for the snake spirit and the other dragon race's emissary to use their surging dragon race's aura to activate the formation to suppress the ferocious beasts. After that, Nangong personally sent the Kunlun mirror into the huge hole that was used to suppress the Taotai. As I looked at Nangong from afar, I couldn't tell what he was thinking. However, I didn't know if it was an illusion, but after he sent the Kunlun mirror away, he seemed to glance at my battle prowess. The corners of his mouth even curled into a mysterious smile. I didn't know if he had noticed me, but since the ceremony had already started, I couldn't care less about him. I focused all of my attention on the huge hole that was used to suppress the ferocious beasts. I mobilized the god's will in my body and sent it into the huge hole. Similar to what had happened in Rapid City, a deity's power was injected into the cave, and within moments, a roar rang out from within. Immediately afterward, a ferocious beast that resembled a giant goat leaped out of the cave. It was several tens of feet in size, and it let out a series of howls that sounded like the cries of an infant, but it was much rougher. The Taotai was the same as Cheong-Chi, a ferocious beast that liked to devour humans. However, I didn't know if it was due to the large amount of gods that the Taotai didn't care about the other half-beastmen in the surroundings after it leaped out of the huge hole. Instead, it charged towards me. Without waiting for it to reach me, or for it to open its mouth, I quickly berated it, telling it to stop at its original spot. Just like Cheong-Chi, the Taotai didn't question my identity and completely obeyed my orders. After I had given it all my orders, it followed my instructions and casually devoured the lesser dragon beastmen in the surroundings. After it had its fill, it flew to the front of the people on the rostrum and quietly waited for them to deal with it. I didn't continue to stay here. Instead, I took advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was on the Taotai to leave the city lord's residence and return to the inn. When the sun had set, the spirit snake came out from the city lord's residence and met up with me. This trip to Wind's Breath City was exceptionally smooth, but Nangong's appearance made me feel that something was off. Furthermore, after leaving the city lord's residence, I faintly sensed that someone was spying on me. Thus, after meeting up with the spirit snake, I didn't even inform Bart before leaving Wind's Breath City with the spirit snake. Wind's Breath City was a city in the sky, so there weren't any guard around it. Leaving in the night wouldn't be troublesome. The spirit snake and I rode on the black dragon beast and traveled through the night. Only when Wind's Breath City was completely out of sight did the feeling of spying on us disappear. Leaving in such a hurry, especially with the spirit snake's identity being made public, would inevitably attract the attention of others. However, the Taotai had already successfully recognized me as its master. Even if it attracted suspicion, I didn't need to pay too much attention to it. Chapter 969. After my injuries had healed completely, I didn't need to use the beast cores to activate my god's power. However, gathering the beast cores could still increase my cultivation. On top of that, we had plenty of time. Hence, the snake spirit and I continued to travel slowly towards Rockfire Castle. We hunted countless ferocious beasts. Just the flying ferocious beasts with monster saint cultivation alone, we hunted close to 20 of them. Apart from swallowing the beast cores, we also kept a few in reserve in preparation to bring them back as gifts. After leaving the West Province, The continuous forest and vegetation disappeared. Instead, the bare ground and dried sand and stones gradually appeared. The desolate Gobi Desert seemed to be a forbidden zone for life. However, when we set up camp at night, we discovered that there were many reptiles on the dried sand and gravel. However, their color was exactly the same as the ground, so we couldn't see them from above. Not only that, there were rustling sounds in the surroundings at night. Occasionally, there would be green eyes flashing in the distance. This discovery made the snake spirit and I overjoyed. We had gotten used to killing ferocious beasts wantonly over the past few days. We relied on the power of the beast cores to rapidly increase our cultivation. We thought that it would be difficult for us to get any more beast cores for the rest of the journey, but it turned out that we had worried too much. The snake spirit and I quickly took action. We each chose a direction, and as we explored far away, we released our spiritual senses to search for ferocious beasts at the monster god realm. The entire night passed. When we met again the next morning, I had 2 dark yellow earth-tier beast cores in my hands. The snake spirit, on the other hand, had found nothing. It wasn't that the snake spirit was lazy, but that most of the ferocious beasts were hidden underground. It was extremely difficult to find them. I had relied on my spiritual senses that could detect from a long distance. After a busy night, I finally found an underground cave. I entered the cave with great effort and fortunately found 2 ferocious beasts at the monster god realm in the cave. I fought against 2 of them alone, and it took me a lot of effort to finally kill them. After sharing the beast cores with the snake spirit and I didn't act separately for a long period of time. Instead, we moved together. I would be in charge of searching, while the snake spirit would be in charge of driving the beasts out of the cave. Then, we would work together to hunt them down. With the daily replenishment of beast cores, coupled with the dangerous battles when hunting ferocious beasts, my and the spirit snake's cultivation could be described as advancing by leaps and bounds. After 1.5 months, we finally passed through the desolate desert. My cultivation base had advanced to the mid-stage of the demon god realm, only a step away from the late stage. In other words, the current me was not far from reaching the red clouds. Above the yang spirit, the gap between each realm could be described as a chasm. With my current cultivation, I still don't have much power to protect myself when facing a sunset ascension immortal. But if I were to face people like old President Lee and Celestial Master Zhang, who were half a step into the sunset ascension, I don't think I would be much inferior. If I had this level of cultivation base when the mountain and sea realm opened, I might have been able to escape with buy-in. Of course, there was no point in thinking about these things now. The only thing I could do was to increase my cultivation as much as possible. The evil spirit had said that there was still a chance for things to turn for the better, so I carried on with hope. After passing through the desolate desert, the snake spirit and I saw a lake in front of us. When I was in Greenwater Village, I had seen on the map that in the southern province, there was the largest lake in the demon domain. It was called the Weak Water. In the classic of mountains and seas, there was a water to the north of the Kunlun Mountains, but its strength could not surpass that of mustard, hence the name Weak Water. I didn't know if this weak water was the weak water, but the most intuitive feeling I got from the lake was that it was huge. Even when I was sitting on the black dragon beast, I didn't feel like I was looking at a lake, but rather a boundless ocean. According to the map, this lake completely separated the southern province from the western province, as well as King City. From my current position, if I passed through the lake in the south, I would reach Rockfire Fortress, and if I passed through the lake in the northeast, I would reach King City. This time, my destination was Rockfire Fortress, so I naturally headed south. I didn't stop at the border between the lake and the desert, and directly urged the black dragon beast to head towards the lake. The dense water vapor gathered on the surface of the lake, making it look like a dreamy cloud swamp. But in reality, there weren't many plants around the lake, making it look as desolate as the desert. The lake was extremely deep, to the extent that the bottom of the lake was pitch black. Occasionally, I could see fishes flipping and jumping on the surface of the lake, which proved that the bottom of the lake wasn't as deathly silent as the surface. The snake spirit sat by my side and acted as though it knew everything. It explained to me that the weak water was directly connected to the mysterious swamp at the easternmost part of the demon domain. Thus, there would occasionally be water races appearing in the lake, but most of them were near the eastern province. After explaining the general knowledge, the snake spirit continued to talk about the legends of the water races, such as beautiful mermaid princesses, passionate clam women, and so on. After boasting for a while, that fellow squinted his eyes and sighed, saying that it was a pity that he couldn't make a trip to the eastern province. Otherwise, he would definitely bring a beautiful mermaid princess back to the human world. While he coveted the women of the water races, I didn't have the leisure to do so. I only released my spiritual awareness to search the bottom of the lake. Not long after, I sensed the aura of many experts. It seemed that there were more high-level beasts in the lake than on land. No wonder it was said that the Eastern's water races were extremely powerful. It could be seen just from the beasts in the water. Since there were beasts in the lake, we wouldn't be bored during this period of time. We would still be able to obtain beast cores to increase our cultivation. The snake spirit and I quickly took action. We first used our spiritual awareness to determine the location of the beasts, then let the black dragon beast fly by itself. The snake spirit and I landed on the surface of the lake, letting him enter the water to lure the beasts. I would then take the opportunity to kill the beasts and obtain the beast cores. This method wasn't much different from the way we hunted beasts previously. The only difference was that we hunted the beasts in the lake instead of underground. We were already familiar with this method. Furthermore, the number of beasts in the lake was much more than in the Gobi Desert. As such, the amount of beast cores we obtained every day was rather impressive. We traveled on the boundless Weakwater Lake for 2 months. During this period of time, the amount of beast cores we obtained was innumerable. In the end, by relying on the huge amount of beast cores, my cultivation was forcefully raised to the Monster God Advanced stage. The next step would be the Monster God Perfection stage, which was also the cultivation of Old President Li and Celestial Teacher Zhang. After this period of experience, I couldn't help but sigh at the abundance of resources in the monster region. This was a world that was much vaster than the human world. Back in the human world, not to mention the beasts that were Celestial Teacher Realm, it was extremely rare to see any beast that had reached Celestial Teacher Realm and could take human form. In the monster region, Celestial Teacher Realm beasts were at the Monster King realm. Even in the desolate Gobi Desert, there were countless of them. After being in the monster region for so long, my understanding of the monster region was still at the initial stage. Even though I had already traveled through 3 provinces, I was still unable to determine the strength of the monster region. However, from the beasts that I had seen, the power of the monster region was simply too strong. Not to mention the entire monster region, even a single province wouldn't be a match for the entire human world. Against such an enemy, the human world wouldn't have the slightest possibility of winning if they were to clash head-on. That was why I placed my hopes on the 4 great beasts of the monster region. Of course, even if everything went according to my plan, with the help of the 4 great beasts in the future, the human world's power would still be far from the monster regions. I could only hope that I could make up for this through time. After 2 months, after walking out of the Weakwater Lake's southern shore, there was still no greenery in front of us. Instead, it became more and more desolate. Countless black gravel and yellow quicksand lay in front of us. It was obvious that we had reached a desert. The shore of the lake was a desert. This obviously didn't make sense. However, I had already found out from the map that the Rockfire Fortress was indeed a city in the desert. In fact, all of the cities in the southern province that had signs of human activity were located in the desert. Chapter 970. Rockfire Castle was a city situated in the middle of the desert. This was similar to Greenwater Village, but the difference was that Greenwater Village was situated in an oasis at the edge of the desert, while Rockfire Castle was situated in the middle of the desert. The surroundings were barren, and there wasn't even a hint of greenery. The spirit snake and I dismounted from the black dragon beast. Looking at the huge city that was enveloped in sand, we couldn't help but frown. It was said that the ruler of Rockfire Castle was the Sand Lizard tribe. They had lived in the desert for generations. Perhaps they were willing to endure the sandstorm, but the spirit snake and I instinctively hated it. It was no wonder that I had heard people say that the southern province rarely interacted with the northwest province and the southern province. Just the sandstorm alone was something that the other half-beast races couldn't endure. After passing through the sandstorm, the spirit snake and I entered the towering city gates of Rockfire Castle. The strange thing was that after entering the city, the sandstorm that filled the sky suddenly disappeared. Other than the sky being slightly dark, the city was actually dry. The air was fresh and the streets were spacious. It instantly made one feel much more comfortable. I raised my head to look at the sky. The sandstorm hadn't disappeared and was even covering the sky. This was the reason why the sky was dark. However, the city seemed to have a transparent filter that blocked the sandstorm outside the city. This was rather interesting. After looking at the weather, I looked at the people on the streets. The city didn't only have the Sand Lizard tribe as I had thought. In reality, the half-beast people on the streets were of various races. However, they were very different from the half-beast people in the northern province and western province. Other than the most commonly seen Sand Lizard tribe, I also saw beautiful young ladies from the butterfly tribe, strong men from the giant crocodile tribe, bespectacled hawksbill turtle tribe scholars, and so on. Apart from them, there were also other races with strange appearances. For example, there were 2 transparent wings on their backs, slender bodies, and elf-like young girls. There were 2 extremely strong arms but short statures, and so on. I couldn't guess what kind of race they were. However, looking at it from a general perspective, the half-beast people here were more of a reptile or insect type. This was a fundamental difference from the northern province and western province. This was an eye-opener for me. After looking at the culture and customs of Rockfire Castle, it was time to hurry up and get down to business. From Wind Breath City to here, it had been more than 5 months, and there was less than half a month left until the awakening ceremony. With the experience from the previous 2 times, it should not be a big problem to deal with the fierce beast Swanee in the Rockfire Castle. However, the previous 2 times, the snake spirit had participated as a member of the dragon clan, especially the second time, when he had taken the initiative to join. If he showed up again this time, he was afraid that it would arouse the suspicion of the demon clan. Even if he succeeded this time, the next fierce beast that would appear in Royal City would be a little more dangerous for no reason. So, after thinking about it, I decided not to let the spirit snakes show up this time. I would deal with everything myself. My current cultivation was close to half a step into the Sunset Realm. Even if I were to face the Monster Emperor, I was confident that I would be able to escape unscathed. Thus, without the help of the spirit snake, I didn't panic. I wandered around the city and found the location of the City Lord's mansion before finding an inn to settle down in. The Rockfire Castle was located in the middle of the desert. Although there was no sandstorm in the castle, there was almost no vegetation. Without vegetation, there were naturally no wooden houses. Thus, the houses in the Rockfire Castle were made of stone. They were squarish and looked quite unique. As the most majestic building in the Rockfire Castle, the structure of the City Lord's mansion was different. It wasn't made of stone, but was made of metal. Looking from afar, the light gold exterior was dazzling even in the dusky weather. Even though I was far away, I could still recognize that the metal was made of pure gold. It seemed that regardless of whether it was in the human world or the demon domain, gold was a hard currency that could be flaunted. After settling down, I snuck into the City Lord's mansion that was made of pure gold that night. The City Lord of the Rockfire Castle, who was only at the intermediate stage of the Monster God realm, wasn't my match. However, I didn't need to find trouble with him. I found an elder of the Gravel Lizard clan in the City Lord's mansion and used some methods to understand the situation. Afterwards, I erased his memory and left without leaving any trace. In summary, the Rockfire Castle's awakening ceremony was no different from the other 2 provinces. Apart from that, I also obtained another piece of information. The Gravel Lizard clan's Monster Emperor of the Gravel Lizard Castle had been in seclusion for many years and didn't care about the outside world. This undoubtedly made me feel much more at ease. After waiting in the inn for a few days, the day of the awakening ceremony arrived. I got the snake spirit to wait in the inn while I snuck into the city lord's mansion to participate in the awakening ceremony. Since everyone's power was inferior to mine, and I didn't have to worry about the monster emperor spying on me, everything went smoothly. The beast that was awakened this time was called Swan and I. According to the records, this beast had the appearance of a tiger with dog fur. It was 6 meters long, had tiger feet, boar's teeth, and a tail that was 8 meters long. Roughly speaking, this Swan and I was a huge tiger with dog fur. It had the tusks of a wild boar and an extremely long tail. According to the records, this beast was extremely stubborn and vicious. However, when it faced the power of a god that I emitted, it didn't show any signs of viciousness. In fact, when it looked at me, its gaze was filled with admiration. It was obvious that it had a good relationship with the monster Emperor Swan. After successfully subduing the Swan and I, and instructing it to settle down and wait for the next meeting, I didn't leave. Instead, I stayed in the city lord's mansion for another day before returning to the inn. I stayed for another day, not because I was worried about any unforeseen events, but because I wanted to check if there was any news of Nangong. It wasn't a coincidence that he appeared in the Wind's Breath city previously. According to my understanding, he was extremely hostile towards the monster race. Now that he took the initiative to hand over the divine weapon to the monster race, he definitely had a motive. I wasn't sure what exactly he wanted to do, but there was no doubt that it was related to me. Hence, I wanted to see if he would continue to participate in the awakening ceremony of the other beasts. Now, it seemed that I was overthinking. He didn't follow me to the Rockfire Fortress. Since Nangong didn't appear, I threw this matter to the back of my mind and stayed in the Rockfire Fortress with the Spirit Snake for a few more days. According to the news from the Dragon Race, the awakening of the last beast in Monarch City was set to be 2 years later. Even though the Rockfire Fortress was far from Monarch City, it wouldn't take more than half a year to reach there. Furthermore, we had been continuously hunting beasts and traveling for the past half a year, so we were both physically and mentally exhausted. Hence, we rested for a period of time in the Rockfire Fortress and stabilized our auras. After stabilizing our cultivation, we left the Rockfire Fortress and boarded the Black Dragon beast once again. We took the northeast direction and crossed the Ruah Shui Lake. When we rushed to the Rockfire Fortress, we had flown above the Ruah Shui Lake for a total of 2 months. We had long lost interest in the black water below us. However, as we headed towards Monarch City, the Ruah Shui Lake seemed to have changed. It wasn't a boundless ocean anymore. Instead, there were islands and reefs. Some of the islands were quite large, and the islands were covered with green plants. It was completely different from the desert that we had seen in the past half a year. Other than the plants, almost all of the islands and reefs had the aura of beasts. However, the Spirit Snake and I were only interested in beasts with the cultivation of monster immortals. Hence, we wouldn't stop at ordinary islands and reefs. We would only stop for a while when we discovered the aura of monster immortals. After hunting the beasts and obtaining their elixirs, we would rest on the islands and reefs for a few days to admire the scenery and wild animals that were completely different from the human world before continuing on our journey. We had plenty of time on our journey. Hence, our journey was very relaxed. Rather than saying that we were in a hurry, it was more like playing. The Spirit Snake had even caught a few ape-like beasts and kept them by its side to train and serve as its servants. We were having a lot of fun. I had considered using this period of time to go to the dragon territory to bring Tong Tong out. However, after careful consideration, I felt that it wasn't safe for the Spirit Snake and I to go to the dragon territory with our current cultivation. Moreover, it was hard to say whether it would affect the matter of subduing the 4 beasts. Hence, I decided to get rid of the last beast of chaos first before considering the matter of saving Tong Tong and leaving the monster territory. We didn't travel at a fast speed during our journey. After drifting for half a year, we were still in the depths of the Ruah Shui Lake. One day, the Spirit Snake and I discovered an island below us on the Dark Dragon Beast. The island was about 3,000 feet in circumference. The surface of the island was lush and verdant. At first glance, there wasn't anything special about it. However, after sensing it, I could faintly feel an extremely majestic and vast power. My first reaction was that we had encountered a beast with the cultivation of Monster Emperor. However, after careful investigation, I didn't find any trace of the existence of any beast on the island. After discussing with the spirit snake's eyes lit up. He said with certainty that this wasn't the aura of a beast, but the aura of a powerful treasure. He also said that the dragon race was the most sensitive to the aura of treasures. He was definitely not mistaken. His conjecture was somewhat reasonable. Treasures like the 10 great divine instruments had formidable power. If there really was a treasure of this level on this island, everything that I'd sensed made sense. Chapter 971. The human world had the existence of the 10 great ancient divine instruments. The land in the monster domain was much vaster, so it wasn't strange for items that weren't inferior to the divine instruments to appear. So, after landing on the island, I became excited. I told the spirit snake what to do and started a search around the island. From afar, I could sense the powerful energy ripples. After standing on the island, the ripples became even more intense. However, what was strange was that as I walked around the island, I sensed the ripples of energy. However, after walking for a long time, the ripples didn't change at all. Usually, no matter if it was a person or a treasure, this kind of power fluctuation should come from a single point. The fluctuations would gradually weaken, so I could determine the location. However, the fluctuations didn't change at all. I couldn't help but be suspicious. Could it be that this power was so strong that I couldn't differentiate the strong from the weak? Or could it be that the entire island was a huge treasure? With doubts in my heart, I quickly met up with the spirit snake on the other side of the island. He was just as surprised as I was. He didn't try to guarantee that the dragon race was naturally sensitive to treasures. He just waved his hand at me and said that he couldn't find the location of the treasure. I didn't say anything but squatted down to observe the ground under my feet. It was normal soil, grass, and trees. There was nothing special about it. After a short moment, I activated my monster power and dug a huge hole. The hole was filled with soil, grass, and roots. Since it was close to the shore, there was a lot of seawater flowing out. There was nothing special about it. I didn't give up and activated my monster power to dig again. However, I bumped into a hard layer of rock. I only scraped some soil, revealing a black reef. It seemed that there wasn't any problem with the island. I had to think about it from another angle. I waved my sleeves and filled the hole with the soil that I had just dug up. Just as I was about to leave, I suddenly realized that something was wrong. Islands were usually made of large reefs. The reefs had been eroded by the seawater, so they were much harder than normal rocks. However, with my current cultivation, not to mention reefs, even if it was metal or iron, it would only shatter when I grabbed it. Although I didn't use much monster power when I grabbed the hole the second time, it wasn't something that a normal reef could resist. This rock was strange. With this thought in mind, I turned around and dug the hole I had just filled. I carefully observed the reef. The snake spirit saw my actions and asked excitedly, "Did you find any clues?" I nodded, but didn't speak to him. I pointed at the black stone below and said, "Dig out the stone below." The snake spirit was a little skeptical. It turned to look at the stone in the pit and scratched its head. "What's wrong with this stone? Is it the treasure here?" As he spoke, he stretched out his arm and touched it. "It's just an ordinary stone. It doesn't look like a treasure. There's nothing strange about it." He asked subconsciously, but his hands didn't stop moving. His arms pushed against both sides of the pit, widening the layer of sand on top of the rock by a few meters. Then, he changed his direction and pushed the front and back several meters. After doing that, he screamed in surprise, "Why is this stone so big?" The pit had become a few meters wide under the effect of the snake spirit, who was a human bulldozer. However, the reef below was still a big piece of black rock. It didn't show any signs of revealing its edge. The snake spirit was a little impatient. It didn't push the soil around anymore. Instead, it raised its arm and turned its right palm into a dragon claw. It clawed at the rock in an attempt to pull it out. With the power of its dragon claw, it could even make 5 holes in a piece of steel. However, when it faced the huge rock, it only made a crisp sound before returning. I lowered my head and saw that there wasn't even a scratch on the rock. The snake spirit finally reacted. It wasn't discouraged and turned to look at me in surprise. Haha, this rock is really a treasure. It can take my claw without leaving a scratch. It's definitely something good. After he said that, he continued to push the soil around. I shook my head and stopped him. I jumped into the pit and placed my hand on the black rock. I closed my eyes and sensed for a while, but I didn't find anything. Then, I turned my palm towards the side of the pit and activated my monster power. Instantly, a palm-sized hole was created in the sand. My monster power surged through the hole while my spirit sense followed behind it. The loose sand on the island naturally didn't obstruct my monster power. Very quickly, my monster power circled around the island in a layer of sand. My spiritual sense, which was following behind, confirmed that the black boulder under the sand really covered the entire island. It seemed that my speculation was right. The entire island was the treasure that the snake spirit and I were searching for. I frowned again. What is this thing? Why is it so big? Also, my spirit sense had already scanned the entire rock, but I didn't find anything. I tried to use my spirit sense to invade its interior, but it didn't work. After briefly explaining the situation to the snake spirit, he too fell into a state of shock. However, this guy was a big-hearted master. It didn't take long for him to roll his eyes and come up with an idea. Let's not care about what kind of treasure it is. I think we should attack it together and bombard it. There will definitely be some movement. We can make a decision then. When faced with an unknown object, directly attacking it was obviously not a very good choice. It might even invite some kind of disaster. However, we had studied it for a long time and still hadn't found anything. We might as well give the snake spirit's suggestion a try. Moreover, with our power, even if we encounter a monster emperor, we would be able to escape. Thus, I nodded and agreed with the snake spirit's suggestion. The snake spirit grinned strangely and leaped into the air. He gathered his strength and spat out a mouthful of dragon flame at the pit. It was an ability that the snake spirit had obtained after reaching the Yang God realm. The white-hot dragon flame didn't only contain great power, but it also contained terrifying power that could melt everything. The snake spirit used the dragon flame for more than a minute before stopping. He descended from the air and asked me anxiously, "I wouldn't melt the treasure, right? That would be a big loss." At this time, the size of the pit had expanded several times. Under the serpent spirit's dragon flame, the surrounding sand had even melted, forming many crystal-like things. However, the black boulder in the pit had not changed at all. It was still buried deep underground. After the snake's spirit muttered, he noticed the situation and stopped talking. He turned to me and said, "It seems that it's a good treasure. Go and try it." I wasn't as exaggerated as the snake's spirit. I just stood next to the pit and activated all of my power at the late stage of the breakthrough. I gathered it in my palm and formed a colorless ball of light. Then, I activated the ball of light and slowly placed it on the black rock. There was no sound. After the ball of light touched the black rock, it immediately turned into a layer of light and spread out on the surface of the black rock. Only when it touched the soil around the pit did a deafening sound come out. The soil and the lake water in the distance seemed to have experienced a violent earthquake. The entire island was completely shaken. However, just like before, the black rock stayed quietly under the soil and did not move at all. We kept silent for a while. Then, the snake spirit spoke first. "What should we do? It can't be an indestructible rock, right? Could it be a meteorite from outer space? It doesn't seem to be of any use." I agreed with the snake spirit's opinion, but I still felt that something wasn't right. After pondering for a while, I opened my mouth and spat out the Xian Yuan sword. The Xian Yuan sword was the sharpest weapon I knew. If I activated the Xian Yuan sword and the black rock didn't move, I wouldn't be able to do anything. Once again activating my cultivation, the Xian Yuan sword instantly emitted a bright light. After gathering all of my power, I raised the Xian Yuan sword and was about to stab downwards. However, before the Xian Yuan sword could enter the pit, there was a violent sound from my surroundings. Immediately after, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The commotion was several times stronger than when I activated my monster power. Chapter 972. Facing the sudden change, I pondered for a moment. I didn't withdraw the Xian Yuan sword, but on the contrary, I channeled more monster power into the sword and continued to stab at the black rock below. The movement in front of us was obviously related to the black rock. We had been busy for half a day just to understand what the black rock was. Now that we had seen the results, how could we stop? With my full power, the Xian Yuan sword's speed became faster and faster. Just as it was about to stab the black rock, the entire island suddenly shook. I was shocked to find that the Xian Yuan sword's speed suddenly slowed down when it was about to touch the black rock. It became extremely slow and then stopped moving. Then it slowly retreated. I couldn't stop it no matter how much strength I exerted. The alarm bells in my head rang, and I didn't want to fight against the power anymore. I wanted to withdraw the Xian Yuan sword first before doing anything else. However, when I did that, I found that the Xian Yuan sword wasn't under my control. It didn't retreat faster, but maintained its previous speed. It floated in midair and hovered there. At the same time, I suddenly stepped on empty air. The entire island seemed to sink. The calm lake water suddenly surged towards the center of the island. The spirit snake and I hurriedly flew up to stabilize our bodies. I looked down and saw that the entire island had sunk to the bottom of the lake after a few seconds. Only some plants were left floating in the surging lake water. Before we could figure out what was happening, our vision suddenly darkened. An enormous object appeared above our heads. It was as though it had covered the entire sky, shrouding us in its shadow. Not only that, but there was a power in the shadow that I couldn't resist. It was as deep as the abyss and as deep as the mountain. I was completely terrified and my body felt numb. This definitely wasn't the power of the Monster Emperor, as even the Monster Emperor wouldn't have such power. I didn't have the time to look up and immediately urged all the power in my body to struggle to escape. However, I was shocked to find that no matter how hard I tried, my body seemed to be frozen on the spot. I could move my hands and feet, but I couldn't move a single step. It was the same for the spirit snake behind me. I didn't know why he had turned into his dragon form. His body was moving back and forth, but he kept spinning on the same spot. I was in a hopeless situation, so I didn't struggle anymore. I lifted my head to look at the shadow above my head. At first glance, I saw a pitch-black object that covered the entire sky. After looking around, I could see that the shadow above my head was actually a giant turtle. Looking at the giant turtle's pitch-black color, I instantly understood. The giant black rock that the spirit snake and I had attacked with all our power should be its shell. The island that we were standing on should be its entire shell. No wonder I was able to sense that abnormal energy earlier. It turns out that the entire island is a living creature. My mind moved like lightning. My first thought was that the black tortoise, an ancient divine beast, had a tortoise-like body and was even stronger than the four vicious beasts. If it wasn't the black tortoise, who else could it be? The human world had the existence of an ancient god-beast, Black Tortoise. Its body was like a turtle, and its power was even stronger than the four vicious beasts. Apart from the god-beast Black Tortoise, who else could it be? The four savage beasts were originally the subordinates of monster god Ling, and I could easily control them. However, this divine beast, Black Tortoise, was a mystical being nurtured by heaven and earth. It obviously wouldn't recognize my identity as Monster Godling and Emperor Ku. Furthermore, the actions of the snake spirit and I just now were obviously not friendly to it. I had no idea what would happen next. At this moment, the snake spirit should have recognized the Black Tortoise's identity. It lifted its head and stopped moving its body. Instead, its body kept trembling. It was unknown whether it was because of the Black Tortoise's power or the fear in its heart. After waiting in silence for a long while, the black tortoise in the air finally moved. It moved its limbs as though it was swimming slowly in the water. It came to the side of the Xian Yuan sword that was floating in the air. It extended its huge turtle claw and grabbed the Xian Yuan sword that was as small as a toothpick. It held it in its hand and studied it for a while. Then, it slowly turned its head and stared at me with its dim yellow eyes. Its eyes looked like a puddle of stagnant water that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. I couldn't see any emotion in its eyes. Its pitch-black eyelids only opened and closed once in a while. Every time it opened and closed, it looked as though it had gone through a change of day and night. After staring at me for a long time, it slowly moved its claws and put the Xian Yuan sword back to its original position. Then it slowly twisted its body and swung its limbs as it swam away like it was swimming. Its movements seemed extremely slow, but as its limbs moved, its body rapidly moved until it disappeared into the water vapor on the surface of the lake. It became a blurry black dot and then completely disappeared. At this moment, the restraints around the spirit snake, and I disappeared along with the Xian Yuan sword. The two of us hastily circulated our monster powers to stabilize our bodies. I extended my hand to retrieve the Xian Yuan sword. After carefully inspecting it, I didn't find any abnormalities. Then, I used the sword nurturing technique to swallow it back into my stomach. The spirit snake was still foolishly staring into the distance. When it saw me looking at it, it returned to its human form and muttered to me, "That thing just now? Was it the divine beast, the black tortoise?" I nodded. It should be it. The spirit snake's face was filled with misfortune and fear. It said miserably, "I thought that I would pick up some treasure. Why did I encounter such a thing? I was stunned just now. I thought that both of us brothers would die here today." I also felt fear, but at this moment, I was even more bewildered. The black tortoise was one of the four spirits of the heavens and earth. It was the god of the north. At the same time, the north belonged to the water and the underworld. Thus, it was also called the water god and the god of the underworld. According to the records, it didn't seem to have any connection with my life. I didn't know why it had looked at the Xian Yuan sword and observed my actions. After staying silent for a long time, I returned to the black dragon beast with the spirit snake and continued to travel along the Ruo River. The divine beast, the black tortoise, had suddenly appeared and didn't communicate with us at all. Thus, it was useless to think too much about it. I could only secretly note it down in my heart. When I returned to the human world, I would communicate with people. Perhaps I would be able to peep into the ancient divine beast's thoughts. This small interlude made the spirit snake and I quiet for a few days. At the same time, whenever we encountered an island, we would subconsciously observe it for a long time to see if it was the divine beast, the black tortoise, or another divine beast. However, among the four spirits, only the black tortoise was a beast that liked peace. The other divine beasts didn't have the patience to float on the water and form islands. As a matter of fact, we didn't encounter such a thing again. After traveling in fear for a few more days, we didn't think about it anymore. We continued to hunt ferocious beasts in the water, slowly moving forward while relying on beast cores to increase our cultivation base. Several months passed in the blink of an eye. With the help of countless beast cores, my cultivation base advanced step by step towards the great circle of the monster god realm. Finally, one day after half a year, I sensed a change in my body and temporarily stopped advancing. I landed on an island and went into seclusion for 3 months, breaking through the late monster god realm and reaching the great circle of the monster god realm. The peak of the monster god realm was equivalent to the cultivation base of the human realm. It was equivalent to reaching the peak of the dawn realm. In other words, I was only 1 step away from the dawn realm. This was the cultivation base of old President Li, Celestial Master Zhang, the sacrificial evil spirit, and the Lord of Penglai. In other words, my cultivation base was now at the same level as theirs. Coupled with the sharpness of the Xian Yuan sword, it was very likely that they were no longer my match. At this moment, I felt that everything was unreal. Thinking back to when the gate of the mountain and sea realm had opened, although it had only been a few years, my memories had already become blurry. If I had this cultivation base back then, perhaps even if President Lee and Celestial Master Zhang joined forces, they wouldn't have been able to stop me. My mind was in a state of chaos. After a long time, I shook my head and came to my senses. The past was the past, and it wasn't good to look back. Now that the mountain and sea realm had opened and the world had changed, the half-stepped-on realm was no longer the limit of cultivation. In the monster domain alone, there were several true Dawn Realm monster emperors. If I wanted to establish myself in the upcoming war, or to fulfill the long-cherished wishes of Monster Emperor June and Emperor Ku, I needed to continue exploring the path of cultivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.